through that work week today. A lot of random, busy college football topics. We have some start times for Utah football. A list of the 138 quarterbacks in P4 football was released yesterday. We'll tell you where the Big 12 quarterbacks came in, where Devin Dampier came in, Barrett Bachmeier and such. We'll give you like the top 5 or 6 in the Big 12. And then Will Hammond is on that list, not Brendan Sorsby. Of course, news came down yesterday, as we were all expecting, that Brendan Sorsby's injunction and appeal was denied. He still has a court date coming up in Lubbock, but yesterday, I think I guess it was 2 days ago when the news broke, the messaging from the NCAA continues to be very clear on this. So what does this mean for Texas Tech? What does it mean for Utah? What does it mean for BYU? A bipartisan college sports bill proposes a salary cap and a transfer limit that was released earlier today. A group of U.S. senators. The Protect College Sports Act, Ted Cruz and Maria Cantwell, of course, Republican Ted Cruz and Democrat Maria Cantwell, the two highest-ranking folks in that space, have come together to negotiate some things that could change the landscape of college football. It certainly has to pass the Senate. I don't know that the one-time transfer penalty without a penalty is something that will be pushed through. That could make its way to the Supreme Court. So how much of this is politicking? How much of this is filibustering? How much of this is real? It's hard to know, but we'll tell you all the details and talk about what it could mean in the landscape of college sports altogether. OTAs in the NFL. Phase 3 for the New England Patriots. Mike Vrabel spoke today for the first time since missing day 3 of the NBA draft, and of course was talked about the ongoing controversy that just will not go away with Mike Vrabel and former Athletic NFL reporter Diana Rossini. But the offseason in the NFL continues to roll along. We'll get to some of those storylines on the show today. And, of course, the NBA playoffs, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the Oklahoma City Thunder with a really nice bounce-back performance at home. They got great games from Alex Caruso. And Jared McCain, who got the start, was awesome for them. And it was the worst playoff game in Victor Wembanyama's young career, 15 playoff games, and Wembanyama was not effective last night. In any way, quite frankly, he had 3 block shots. He's going to have 3 block shots showing up to the game, but only had 6 boards and was 4 of 15 from the floor, 0 of 5 from 3. Hit all 12 of his free throws. You know, last night, the Oklahoma City Thunder are awesome, but the free throw contest that breaks out when they play NBA basketball, it brings the action to a screeching halt. Oklahoma City shot 32 free throws. San Antonio shot 32 as well. 64 combined free throws between these two teams last night. And it made it unwatchable at times, but Oklahoma City is now Oklahoma City shot 38, while San Antonio shot 32. So one game closer, OKC is, to meeting the New York Knicks in the NBA Finals. Of course, the Knicks in the Finals for the first time since 1999, inching closer and closer to June, which will be the official month of the NBA draft, and continued conversation about what the Utah Jazz will do with that number 2 pick. We will talk about it on the program today. And we have a little bit of an update on the Millers project to bring Major League Baseball to our market. Now, Rob Manfred has said on multiple occasions this will not happen until the next, I believe, until actually the collective bargaining for MLB is next year. And there are some really concerning rumors about what may happen to try to curb spending. Of course, the Dodgers are outspending everybody by like a long shot. But I believe Manfred said the first year they'll look at expansion is 2029. Now, there's always the possibility that the Millers could luck into a team the way that the Smith Entertainment Group did when Arizona Coyotes needed a new home, and Ryan and Ashley Smith were ready for that. So there's always that on the table. But we'll get into some of that on the show today. Good guest list. Start things off with Bill Oram from the Oregonian. Bill was here for a number of years working for the Trib. Now he's up in his home market and has been writing a lot on this really odd situation as Tom Dundon has taken over the Portland Trail Blazers and is treating it like a yard sale of sorts, cutting costs left and right, And we'll do some NBA and some college football with Bill. He covers Oregon as well, Oregon State. So I always enjoy my chats with Bill Orem on the program today. Chris Kamrani, college football with CK today. There's a lot of college football to talk about with Chris. I referenced the list that was released yesterday, the top 138 quarterbacks in order. We'll go over the Big 12 stuff with him. This bipartisan bill brought to the Senate floor. We'll talk to Chris about that. Then the start times for Utah football. And the U.S. men's national team roster was released yesterday, so we'll do some World Cup with CK on the program. Speaking of the World Cup, Kurt Schmidt joins us from RSL. We'll get his thoughts on Diego Luna and Xavier Gozo not having their names called. We'll talk kind of big picture, reviewing the first part of the season for RSL, then look ahead to what it could look like after this 2-month break for MLS soccer as we make way for World Cup soccer here in our region. And then Tim McMahon, Band McMahon, to talk some NBA playoffs and some Jazz basketball. So good guest list on a Wednesday afternoon with Bill Orem, Chris Kamrani, Kurt Schmidt, Tim McMahon, me, Spence Checketts. All of you, the great listeners, and that guy, bipartisan Bill expert, Porter Larson, producing the show. How are you?
I'm well. Yeah, plenty to get to on law and sports and the intertwining of the two. Some good guests on the show today to do just that. Of course, we got Sports Court tomorrow, but yeah, bipartisan. Trying to be.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If this actually goes through, I mean, there's part of me that believes it might pass the Senate floor and then end up in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is going to have to backpedal a little bit on their assertion that the NCAA are antitrust violators, because they're going to need an antitrust exemption to enforce this one-time transfer. That, to me, the one-time transfer thing is not going to fly. It just isn't.
I'm with you there. I think that while I understand the frustration when guys are jumping ship and leaving and you have a different roster every year, the solution to that is to create an environment where guys don't feel like they have to look for greener grass every other year, or where maybe these smaller schools have an opportunity to compete and guys aren't leaving for greener pastures every time that they have any sort of success. That's the solution, is to create an environment where it's not so intriguing to go take a check just to sit on the bench at Ohio State, right? The answer to that is not to say, hey, we are going to limit your choice on where you play, when you play, and how you play, because that, again, is inching into territory that is not really legal. Again, I think if you're any citizen of these United States, you should be able to pick where you live, pick where you work, pick where you go to school. The incentive, the onus is on the institutions to create an environment where you don't want to leave every year, not on the law to tell you where you can and can't live.
Yeah, well said. It is notable that we do have two political parties that have actually come together to do one thing. It'd be nice if they could come together, do a lot of things, but we'll see if this goes through. We'll get into it on the show. All right, Bill Orem will be our first guest. Then it's Chris Kamrani, Kurt Schmidt, Tim McMahon before Bill stops by. Wednesday afternoon style, courtesy of our friends at IFA Country Stores. It's time now for your opening tip. You're the turf whisperer, the grass-cutting guru. Dandelions don't stand a chance on your watch. That's right. When it comes to your lawn, power moves are the only move you make. That's why you just applied IFA's Weed and Feed for strong, dark green turf without a weed in sight. IFA's Weed and Feed, it's the ultimate lawn owner power move at IFA.coop or a local Utah store today. All right, the Western Conference Finals in the NBA moved back to Oklahoma City last night after San Antonio smoked OKC in San Antonio on Sunday. And it was a bounce back of pretty epic proportions for Oklahoma City. They, of course, were probably up against it with a little more pressure than the Spurs, San Antonio having Game 6 at home. We've already seen both teams win on the other's home floor, so San Antonio by no means is dead. But Oklahoma City, when they have their bench ticking, and they had their bench ticking last night, I mean, the depth is just incredible. Like, Jalen Williams is not playing right now. A.J. Mitchell is not playing right now. They got 31 very solid minutes from Cason Wallace. After going scoreless in Game 4, Alex Caruso had 22. He also had 6 assists and 3 steals. Kendrick Williams was dusted off, came in, hit a couple of threes. The other Jalen Williams with a solid 17 minutes. And Mark Dagnall moved Jared McCain into the starting lineup, which proved to be a stroke of brilliance, certainly in the second half where he had 18 of his 20 points. 7 of 19, 3 of 9 from 3. But again, most of the damage done in the second half, and he hit a lot of big shots when San Antonio was creeping back into this. Mark Dagnall has really decided to go with Isaiah Hartenstein as the main defensive player on Victor Wembanyama, and it actually has been working pretty effectively. Shea did the Shea thing, 17 free throws, 16 of 17. So exhausting at times to watch that dude chase fouls. But again, the incentive structure of pro basketball is if you're able to draw fouls, get to the free throw line. Free throws are a way to expedite inefficient offensive basketball if you're not shooting well from the outside. Now, when Oklahoma City does both, and they did both last night, 14 of 32 from 3, 44% as a team, you love that. Then 33 of 38 from the free throw line, 16 of 17 from Shea. You're just going to have a hard time beating this team. It was a good Chet game, probably the best Chet Holmgren game we've seen of the series. He had 16 points and 11 boards after only having 10 in Game 4. And Isaiah Hartenstein, as I referenced, it's not just guarding Wembanyama. He had 15 boards. He had 4 assists, made 6 of 8 shots for 12 points. In 15 career games, that was almost far and away the worst Victor Wembanyama game we have ever seen. As Mitch Johnson said after the game, he's got to take more than 15 shots. But San Antonio was pretty intentional about trying to get him going, so much so they made him the primary ball handler on some high pick and rolls, like 25 feet away from the basket. Forced up a couple threes, didn't hit a three. He was 0-5, did get to the free throw line 12 times and made all of them. And for a guy that size, that's an impressive thing. But 15 shots to score 20 points, only made 4 of them. Julian Champagnie was carrying them early. He had 11 straight points, 13 in the first quarter overall. 22 points, 8 boards from him, 3 steals. You can't ask for much more than that. But these young ball handlers continue to struggle with turnovers. Dylan Harper, 3 turnovers last night. Stephon Castle, 3 more turnovers for him. Those aren't massive numbers, but in playoff basketball, when possessions are at a premium, you've got to protect the ball. And, De'Aaron Fox, I think, has looked pretty good coming off that hamstring injury. He couldn't find his shot last night either. 4 of 15 for De'Aaron Fox as well. Devin Vassell was 2 of 11, 2 of 9 from 3. Stephon Castle, outside of the turnover issues, has been a very solid playoff performer despite being a young player. He had 24 points, 6 assists, 5 boards, and 3 steals, and was probably the best defensive option against Shea, even though with the way Shea has kind of figured out this thing, obviously 2-time MVP, NBA champ a year ago, it's going to be hard to limit him. I do think San Antonio can go home and win Game 6, but one of the reasons I've talked about the urgent nature for the Jazz to start their process, to be serious about competing and actually try to win games, which sounds pathetic. San Antonio just went from the lottery to the Western Conference Finals, which never happens. But you know what absolutely never happens is a lottery team winning a championship, even a lottery team that has a generationally special player like Victor Wembanyama. Oklahoma City cracked the code last year. They hoisted the Larry O'Brien Trophy as your NBA champs. They know how to do this. This is San Antonio's first time. And if they were able to break through, and who knows, maybe they still will because the playoffs are the ultimate in live theater, it would be rather historic. Now, they have a historic player in Victor Wembanyama, but I just think it's going to be difficult for either San Antonio or the New York Knicks to kind of derail this Oklahoma City train. They're without 2 of their top 4 wing players right now, and it just doesn't matter because they have so much depth. We'll see if San Antonio can extend the series tomorrow in Game 6 back in their building. All right, we'll catch a break. An old friend, Bill Oram, will be our first guest on the program today. We're going to do more or less an hour of college football, little U.S. men's national team with Chris Kamrani. Latest on the RSL front with Kurt Schmidt, then some more NBA basketball with Tim McMahon. Busy Wednesday drive. Good to have you along for the ride. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, we got our guy CK live in studio. Chris Camerani will join us for an entire hour. We'll probably do mostly college football, Chris, today. Little U.S. men's national team. Kurt Schmidt will stop by later on, and then Tim McMahon drops your NBA Daily Assist as the NBA playoffs continue to roll along, and the Utah Jazz have the number 2 pick in the NBA draft. Our next guest is a good friend, and it's been a long time. He used to reside around these parts. He's now back home up in Portland, where I'll be next weekend. Bill Oram, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, man. What's going on?
Oh, you know, another day down here doing a little late spring, summertime radio. How you been? Everything good with you? I know you've been a busy boy.
Yeah, things are great here. I mean, spring is springing, which is nice. Finally getting some pretty nice northwest weather. Hopefully that'll hold for you when you're here next week. But it's obviously been a busy time with the Blazers, making a bit of a playoff run for the first time in 4 years, and everything that comes with the change in ownership. So it's been busy, but fun.
Are you going to announce on the program today that you've accepted the sports editor job at the Salt Lake Tribune?
I had to decline the offer. They reached out and they made a very aggressive offer, but I had to tell. I'm just too happy where I am.
How about our guy, Aaron, away from sports? It's gonna be weird to not have him in the sports ecosystem.
I know. I hate when good things happen to good people. But climbing the corporate ladder at the Salt Lake Tribune. And to be clear, I guess I should always clarify when I am using sarcasm, and I can't use a hashtag or blue font to make it clear. I was not offered the position at the Salt Lake Tribune, but I hope they find somebody amazing because I have such great memories of my time there working with great people like Aaron, like CK, and sports editor emeritus Joe Baird.
For sure. And always love to support our friends of the Trib. All right, busy news cycle surrounding the Portland Trail Blazers as there is a new owner in town who has, how shall I say, arrived rather loudly to make some financial decisions that have rubbed some people the wrong way. You were able to interview Tom Dundon. Kind of walk us through this, how this whole thing kind of went down, what it was like to talk to him, and what you learned after sitting down with him.
So I've interviewed Tom a few times now. First time was on the day that he took over as the owner back in March. And then again over the weekend in Raleigh, North Carolina. I went out there to kind of check in on his operation with the Hurricanes. They're in the Eastern Conference Finals, as your very hockey savvy audience knows. And, he and I sat down for, quite a while at the Hurricanes headquarters and talked through a lot of the issues facing the team, including the need for a new arena. And that's the biggest thing. And you can go all the way back to last summer. Jody Allen, executing, running the executor of the estate for her brother who died in 2018, had put the team up for sale. We didn't know who Tom Dundon was. We didn't know he was a prospective owner of the Trailblazers. But at Summer League last summer, Adam Silver was asked about Portland and the sale. And he made the comment that kind of got everybody spun up in the first place when he said Portland's going to need a new arena. And Moda Center, formerly the Rose Garden, is 31 years old. And you guys know as well as anybody with what the Delta Center has gone through its various iterations, trying to figure that out over the last 10 years and obviously undergoing a major renovation right now. How is that going to happen? And so when Tom Dundon is identified as the buyer, he was not going to put any money into an arena renovation. The building is owned by the city, and it was made really clear early on that this was going to need to be a publicly financed renovation if it was going to get done at all. And so you had the Blazers trying to force through essentially the framework of a deal that was agreed upon in principle between the city, state, and county. Tom Dundon was in agreement that he would sign a 20-year lease to stay if this deal could get pushed through. The state did its part during the legislative session, and the city is balking a little bit, and they have a lot of questions, and there's things that they want to rework and things that they want to extract in exchange for their piece of the deal. And that's where, you risk losing Tom Dundon, because he said to me, hey, the city council, they weren't party to the original agreement that we made. It was non-binding. They weren't party to it, so I wouldn't expect to hold them to it. But if they want to start making changes, then we need to take a step back and look at the whole thing. And so that's kind of where it sits right now. But what I found about Tom Dundon is that he just is very direct about what he thinks, and he's very has great conviction in the way he views situations and what he is willing to do and what he's not willing to do. You saw the Blazers had substantial layoffs here last week. They laid off more than 70 people. And even in talking to Tom about those moves, it's pretty clear. What goes unsaid is that he probably thinks that there should have been even more reduction in staff, because he points to the fact that there's still 60 or 70 more people working for the Trailblazers than for the Carolina Hurricanes. And so he has run a really, really lean operation in Carolina, but the Canes have had a lot of success under him. They've been to the playoffs each of the 8 years that he's been their owner. They've been to the conference finals 3 of the last 4 years, and right now they have a 2-1 series lead over the Canadiens. So, success has sort of clouded the cost cutting in Carolina, or sort of the stingy ownership approach in Carolina, as winning does. So the question is, is there, what level of winning, sort of offsets this like really severe right sizing that he's trying to do? And I guess one point I'd make about that is that when he took over the Hurricanes, he took over from an owner who was not spending on players. He was not investing in the hockey. And so when Tom Dundon shows up and, isn't really investing in the business side, but is maybe being a little more strategic about the business side, but is then investing on the hockey side, to Carolina fans, it looks like he's pouring resources into the organization. Well, Paul Allen was not a stingy owner by anybody's definition. The Blazers spent a lot of money under Paul Allen's tenure. And so, that is what Dundon is now essentially trying to walk back or find kind of the right place for financially. But it certainly feels cheap. It certainly feels like you are not benchmarking yourself against the rest of the NBA, which is a league of extravagance where, good owners are spending on everything that they can to try to give themselves any kind of edge, whether it's in business or basketball. So it's very odd to feel really kind of the aftershock of Tom Dundon's arrival here.
So I've always said there's a lot of parallels between the Salt Lake sports market and the Portland sports market, and namely our pro basketball teams kind of being the gem of really the ecosystem, with the Blazers up there and the Jazz down here. The Jazz have not been in danger of potentially leaving Salt Lake since 1988, when there was a moment in time where we thought maybe it would be the Minnesota Jazz, and it was because of the lack of, at the time, forward progress for a new arena. Now, of course, that was rectified. The Jazz have stayed. Ryan and Ashley Smith, the Smith Entertainment Group, have done a great job with kind of their reimagined downtown and the reimagined Delta Center for the hockey experience. What is worst case scenario here? I mean, if you don't think NBA City's ever going to lose their team because of a stadium situation, ask the folks in Seattle what it was like to watch the Sonics be ripped from underneath them. I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but is there any chance, any danger that Portland is in trouble to potentially lose their NBA team?
I think there's a significant chance that Portland's in danger of losing the Blazers. That is going to be determined by the city council and the Multnomah County commissioners in the coming months. But the way I understand sort of this showdown is, if the agreed upon deal, Tom Dundon calls it an agreed upon deal. The city council says that they're basically at the very, very beginning of this. And the problem is, you had essentially a framework of a deal in principle between Dundon, the Blazers, the mayor, the governor, and the county chair. And so you've got the executives of each of these four, disparate entities sort of, taking the lead. But now it's incumbent on the mayor to essentially get his city council on board. It's incumbent on the council president to get the county commission on board. The state already proved its part, but it's a high wire act. And if one of those legs of the stool, falls through or fails to deliver, then the state's piece doesn't trigger, and you have no funding for renovations for this building. And so if that falls through, there's about to be 3 years left on the lease. That is, or I guess 4 years left on the lease. That is going to open the door for Dundon to say, the city of Portland has already rejected one deal that was on the table to keep us here. So we tried. They didn't want us here. We have to look somewhere else. And I think that is 100% the playbook. And I think that Dundon did not buy the Blazers with the intent of moving them. I don't think that he had the same level of craven ambition that Clay Bennett did when he bought the Supersonics. I mean, what came out about the Supersonics after the fact was absolutely galling, down to he and his co-owner on the day the sale closed, crowing about moving the team to Oklahoma City. There was no good faith on the part of Clay Bennett when it came to the Seattle Supersonics. I think there is some good faith from Tom Dundon here. He did it in Carolina. A lot of people thought that the Hurricanes were going to be moved. The Hurricanes were ripe for relocation. I don't think that's Dundon's game. If he can make it work, it's easier to make it work where the team is. But the business climate in Carolina was completely opposite of where Portland is. It is a growing market. It is a market with significant, a significant business presence and a tax structure that is really business friendly. Portland is the opposite. Multnomah County has been bleeding corporations. Businesses have been leaving Portland for the suburbs or leaving the state. We tax high earners like basketball players at a rate that is as high as New York City. And those are the two highest tax rates in the NBA. So if you're an NBA player and you're going to have to pay significant taxes, you can go to New York or you can go to Portland. Or you can pay less taxes literally anywhere else. So it's a hard place to do business. And I think that those are the things that are sort of driving, Tom Dundon's bargain here of he needs to get some stuff in return in order to want to keep his team in Portland, Oregon. And the stuff that he needs to get in return, the kind of the incentives that make up this deal and make this deal attractive are the things that, are going to lead him to sign this long-term lease. And if you start wanting him to give things back, and they're asking for all sorts of things that on the face don't seem unreasonable and certainly seem fan-friendly, the idea of street pricing in the arena. Like Portland International Airport is famous for, you can buy a beer for the same cost as you would, at a bar in downtown. You don't get the jacked up airport prices. So there are people who want that in the arena. That's just not going to happen from an owner that is trying to make money in a city that's not easy to make money in. And so I think as soon as this proposal falls apart, if it falls apart, and I think that, people who are observing it closely think there's certainly a strong possibility of that happening, I think Dundon starts saying, I have no choice but to see what else is out there, what other markets have to offer. And that's when, he starts getting courted by Nashville, St. Louis, Kansas City. I think Austin's a dark horse, despite the presence of San Antonio. Vancouver, and all of that starts looking a lot more appealing than this rock fight that it's taking just to get a deal across the finish line in Portland.
So it's always kind of hard to see through smoke screens to understand what's real, what's a threat, what's propaganda. It was very much real that Ryan Smith wanted to move the Jazz down south. That was a very real thing, okay? So, he was able to parlay that quote-unquote threat to basically $1 billion to keep the Jazz in the capital city. And I believe the Jazz should always be in the capital city. I believe the Blazers should always be in the capital city. But
Salem's the capital, Spence.
Thank you. Thank you for the geography lesson. And you're not wrong there. You're not wrong there. But look, this is right out of the playbook of owners. Go to the city, say, I need X, Y, and Z to renovate a stadium, build an arena. And if you don't give that to me, I am taking my ball and I am going home. It worked for Ryan to the tune of $1 billion. Do you think this is going to work for Dundon? And do you know how much money he's asking for this renovation project?
Yeah, the deal that they're seeking here is significantly more modest than what Salt Lake City stepped up with. The total package for the arena renovations is just shy of $600 million. So, $600 million in public money is not an insignificant amount, by the way, particularly in a state that is facing budget shortfalls, that's cutting programs, and is ranked near the bottom of the country in education. These are not easy decisions for lawmakers and elected officials to make, I grant. But $600 million total. The state has already agreed to provide $365 million of that upfront cost in bonding that would come out of the income taxes of players and other performers at Moda Center, but primarily players. And then so you're really talking about the other $235 million split between the city and the county. And the city had said the mayor had committed $120 million of city money, a majority of which was going to, roughly 2/3 of which was going to come from a voter-approved clean energy fund that has grown to be dramatically larger than anybody had anticipated. It's a tax on corporations in Portland, and it has collected way more money than anybody expected. So it has become kind of this slush fund for projects of all kinds in Portland and all sorts of areas. Whenever there's something that needs money in Portland, can you access the clean energy fund to pay for it? And so that's what they tried to do here. And there's been some pretty stiff resistance to that. But even bigger here than just the climate money is the philosophy of should the taxpayers or should the city be using tax dollars to essentially subsidize what becomes a billionaire's project, right? The city owns the building, but the building needs to be renovated essentially because of the strong arming of the NBA and an incoming owner. If not for the NBA's urgency on this, the city of Portland could renovate Moda Center on its own timeline. The building needs to be renovated. Do not get me wrong. I mean, it is falling behind industry standards, every day. But you wouldn't need to do it to the tune of the $600 million. You wouldn't need to do it on the NBA and Tom Duncan's deadline necessarily. And so that's where the philosophical break is. And you have a city council that is still in the early stages of a totally new structure. The city of Portland changed its city charter in the last couple of years, changed the structure of local government. You have people who are new in their roles as city councilors. On a 12-person city council, you have 5 members of the Democratic Socialists of America who are, strongly opposed to the idea of subsidizing billionaires. So this is a really fragile situation. And I just think that, and I'm writing another story. As we alluded to, I spent time in Raleigh over the weekend talking to people there, talking to Dundon, but also fans and also people who worked on the arena deal he got there, which was $300 million in public money to renovate what is now the Lenovo Center. And the mindset of the people I spoke to there is, this is a community asset. We would be stupid not to be funding it, not to be paying to maintain it and upgrade it, to keep our team here. The Hurricanes are the only thing we got. The attitude in Portland seems to be pretty different among a lot of influential people, which is sort of the billionaire can pay for it himself. And that can be a perfectly reasonable position, but you have to understand that the consequence of that position is that is where you potentially lose having the billionaire in your market and lose the team that he owns. And if that's a trade-off that you're willing to accept, that's not how I view this situation. I think it is critical to the future and the viability of the city and the state to have the Trailblazers here. Congratulations to Salt Lake. Salt Lake has done, and truly to Ryan and Ashley, you bring in the Mammoth. You're no longer a one-horse town, and that makes you more appealing to baseball. And everybody now sort of seems to think that baseball is going to end up in Salt Lake City. So now Salt Lake has grown from a one-horse town to a city that has 3 of the 4 major professional sports, whereas Portland is a city that 5 years ago I think we would have said was pretty analogous with Salt Lake as a sports market. Now struggling to cling to the one professional sports team it has. And a line that I've used in past coverage is that the Blazers are the only thing that make Portland more like Seattle than Spokane. And I do really struggle with the idea of a city like Portland that is struggling to get back on its feet economically after 2020, has suffered massive reputational hits in the last 6 years, is doing good things and is making its way back, but is still so far behind where we were before the pandemic. If you were to take the Trailblazers out of here, or if Portland was unable to hold on to the Trailblazers, what that would do to the economy, but also to the sense of place and civic pride and culture and what makes Portland, I think it would be devastating. I think it would just be absolutely devastating. And and I'm not saying that means that, therefore you just roll over and give the billionaire everything he wants. I actually think the deal that's in front of them, especially when you're looking at the fact that the city, which owns the building, is only being asked to pay for 120 out of $600 million upfront costs, and then about 14 million, I think, in ongoing maintenance costs annually, is actually a better deal for the city than if the city was responsible for figuring this out on its own. The state didn't have an obligation to step up here. The state didn't have an ownership share of the arena until they passed it in the legislature. The county doesn't have a direct revenue stream from Moda Center. They have a lot of indirect revenue from Moda Center, but they don't have a direct revenue stream. But they're stepping up with close to $90 million. So, the city, it's their building, and they're getting bailed out by the county and the state for a huge piece of this project, and they're still balking and threatening to blow the whole thing up. And then you're going to be left with a situation where the Portland Trailblazers are now playing in Austin, Nashville, Mexico City, wherever. You don't have that asset. You don't have that primary tenant, but you still have a 20,000-seat arena where you want to have Beyonce and George Strait play concerts. But wait, they aren't going to come anymore because you haven't upgraded the arena to the serviceable level. So now you're really getting the Oak Ridge Boys for a month-long residency in November, and you don't have the revenue stream from a primary tenant and in the Blazers and this income tax that they want to use to renovate the building. You don't have that anymore. You don't have a mechanism to renovate the building, and it continues to fall behind the times, and the city doesn't get to take advantage of the many benefits that come from hosting world-class events. Spence, do you understand why I'm freaking out about this?
Yes, absolutely. 100%. I mean, look, and obviously when it comes to how we feel about the Jazz here, it's an easy parallel to draw for Jazz fans to understand how dire this could be up in Portland. But I do want to get here before I set you loose. Tom Dundon, born in New York, he does most of his business in Dallas. He has his own firm, Dundon Capital Partners. And like most billionaires, when you look at how he made his money, there's a lot of whoa, dude, several of his, previous business dealings. He was mired in litigation, extra finance under investigation by attorneys in multiple states over predatory lending practices. All of this,
including Oregon.
Oh, geez. Well, all of this to say, did Jody Allen just look for the highest bidder? Because the nice thing about Ryan and Ashley is they're committed to Utah. So if the Jazz were going to leave Salt Lake, they would not have left Utah. They would have ended up probably down in Utah County, which would have brought a number of issues to play, namely staying in a La Quinta and eating Jimmy John's for NBA players before they figure that thing out. But why Dundon? Why not try to find somebody that, like Ryan and Ashley, care about Utah? Why not try to find somebody who cares about Portland, who cares about Oregon?
The only person who probably really fit the bill there was Nike co-founder Phil Knight, who is 88 years old now, but obviously still lives here, has contributed a ton of money to the University of Oregon, but also really invested in the community and in civic projects in Portland. He invested $400 million in an effort that's to help restore an area around the Moda Center that is the historically black neighborhood in Portland that was essentially paved over via eminent domain, in the middle of last century. So, he is the person who, from a civic, standpoint and a public trust standpoint, made the most sense. He tried to buy the team 3 years ago. He made an offer of, I want to say, $2.5 billion at the time. Jody wasn't ready to sell. She obviously read the room correctly that the values were still going up. And by the time she put the team on the market, Phil had announced that he was no longer interested, given his age, in acquiring the team. And that left a big vacuum in terms of local ownership. Now, when it came down to it, there were two groups trying to buy the Trailblazers. One of them was led by Tom Dundon, and the other was led by the Bethal family, Raj Sports. And if you're not following this, that is the family that owns the Portland Fire, the WNBA, and the NWSL team, the Thorns. They're new to the market, but they had a real interest in keeping the Blazers here. They are the ones, they own other sports franchises in the city. It's obviously It would be great for them in terms of the operational efficiencies of their, other organizations that own the Trailblazers, which are already a humming machine, obviously. They had a competitive offer. And it's been one of the great questions of this entire thing. What tilted it to Tom Dundon over the Basalls? And I think one thing that you have to look at is that the Basalls, that their stewardship of the WNBA franchise and getting the WNBA franchise off the ground was pretty clunky. They hired a president, then fired her after 2 months. They had a lot of blowback on some of the branding and just, they were seen as being behind the 8 ball in terms of launching the franchise. Everything they did was 6 months behind what was happening in Toronto with the Tempo. It's kind of their contemporary as an expansion franchise. And everything with the Fire right now is going great. Like, they're 4-3 to start the season. The culture around the team is really awesome. But I think there was probably more trust in Dundon as an operator, as a proven operator, as a controlling owner. His run with the Hurricanes, I think, was very convincing to other NBA owners and probably created an easier path in terms of getting a deal approved, especially at that valuation. But also, I mean, the fact is the Blazers were worth what they were worth because the lease was expiring. The building needed to be renovated. Portability was what drove the value to the price point it was able to get to. The team is worth more because there is a potential that you could move it. And if the Basalls were going to buy the team, there was no chance they were going to move the team. They were not going to have the same leverage with the city, county, and state to negotiate a deal. So honestly, it feels like this whole thing was sort of designed to fall into Tom Dundon's lap or into the lap of somebody like him who is going to be able to maximize the opportunity to either renovate the building or move the team, which contributed to the value. So there was a local owner. Well, the Basalls live in Southern California, but they represented the local sort of option here. And Jody simply went the other way, or the estate went the other way. And we don't know what the requirements of the estate were. Those were never shared publicly. But, it sure would have been nice if something had happened that would have allowed there to be a local owner, somebody who was invested into Portland. But this, again, is not a business-friendly climate. There are only 3 billionaires in the state of Oregon. And it just isn't the place where you're going to have that level of local wealth. And I guess I'll finish with this. I have spent some time with Tom, and I enjoy talking to him. I think he's a fascinating guy. I think that he is, I think he's obviously very, very smart. I think he knows what he's doing. I also think that he is probably, he certainly is determined to do things his way and what he wants to do. But culturally, I cannot imagine a worse owner for the Portland Trailblazers than Tom Dundon. Portland is a city that, cares a lot about a lot of things around their organizations, and I just think that from a mentality standpoint and a style of doing business, that this is an oil and vinegar situation. I think Dundon's going to turn off a lot of people with his style of doing business, his style of negotiating. And I certainly hope that that is not the thing that kills this deal. But I don't know that you could have probably found a worse fit for the city of Portland than Tom Dundon.
Well, look, I spent a lot of time up there. My best buddy from college moved up there about a decade ago. So I've got a soft spot for the market, and we'll be hoping for good things, Bill. I appreciate the time, man. Are you getting down here anytime soon?
Well, if I want to see an NBA game, I might need to. But that if I do, I will be giving you a call, Spence. So I hope that happens. So I can give you a call soon.
All right, man. Sounds good. Thanks for the time. Be good, Bill. Okay.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bill Oram was down here for a while working for the Salt Lake Tribune. Now he's up with the Oregonian. And, I've always said our market has so many similarities with Portland as it pertains to the sports ecosystem. And losing the Blazers is something that seems unconscionable to me. It's like thinking about Utah losing the Jazz. And it is interesting to consider, like if the Millers were going to sell, it is a great thing that they did sell to somebody who does care about Utah. Now, Ryan was very much not just interested, but looking at options to move the Jazz to Utah County. I can tell you that for sure. And this is right out of the playbook. You threaten to move the Jazz out of the capital city, and then you go to you go to our state legislators and leaders and say, okay, you want me to keep the team here? It's going to cost you $1 billion. And he got $1 billion. So we'll see if Tom Dundon takes a different path. But some interesting stuff from Bill today. Stops by courtesy of our friends at Advanced Window Products. Now, a little warmer today, right? About 80 degrees. We're going to have a couple of cool days this week and maybe some precipitation, but we're going to blink, and it's going to be 105 degrees outside. Here's the deal. If your house is cold in the winter, even though you have your heater jacked up, if your house is hot in the summer, even though your central AC is as high as it can go, number one, you're hemorrhaging money. And number two, it's because you need new windows. Now, the nice thing is our friends at Advanced Window Products, our guy Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sac Lake City, his buddy Jake Weber, run an excellent business that you can trust and count on. And right now you can save a grip of cash, $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. Now, they're offering something new. If you only need 4 or 5 windows replaced, they're going to prorate that discount for you. That's kind of a new wrinkle to what they're doing. They cut out the middleman because they build, install, and then guarantee for life. So if you're looking to maybe buy a home, if you're looking to maybe sell a home, you can take advantage of this because the guarantees are transferable to the next homeowner. So take advantage of the spring window special from Advanced Window Products by calling them today at 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or online at advancedwindows.com. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. CK, Chris Comrade, coming up next on ESPN 700. Hunter Yurachek, Arkansas's athletic director, is angry about late kickoff times. Yeah, it's Sports Talk Radio in late May, so we're going to talk kickoff times. But my first question for Chris Comrani is how on a 78-degree crystal clear day you did not ride your bike to downtown Salt Lake City, Utah?
I think you know the answer.
Well, I mean, there are a few different directions we could go. Did you get busy with the lad, or are you working?
I am installing metal edging in the front yard, Spence.
Oof.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Got the rubber mallet out, trying to make the place look nice.
Do you know how to do this, or are you utilizing YouTube tutorial videos?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
The answer is yes.
Is Leo a fan of the Cranberries yet?
Yes.
Nice.
That's why I chose his favorite song, but unfortunately, it's not in the budget for ESPN 792.1 FM. So I had to go with a backup, but it's still a banger. Leo loves the Cranberries. Ode to my family.
How are you enjoying the playlist? That's the biggest question.
It's elite, man.
Appreciate that.
I mean, there isn't a more transportable playlist that I've come across where I'm like back in my parents' black Volvo with the radio on. So I appreciate that. I miss those black Volvos.
Well, one thing I appreciate about you is your affinity for the 90s, even though you were just a youth.
Well, I mean, it was the best decade, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. There's no.
Okay.
I don't think there's any argument.
I mean, you experienced it probably on a more tangibly fun level than I did, but I was still smashing the sticks on N64, had the Nerf basketball hoop on the back of the door, watching Space Jam, all the things.
Good times. Good times. We could get nostalgic about the 90s for the next hour or so, but we will not do that. We will talk about some of the college football storylines that have kind of permeated throughout the news cycle over the past 24 hours. We do have some kick times for Utah, but the one that's getting attention today is the September 12th game where Arkansas is here. It is 8:15 Mountain Time, which is 9:15 Central Time, which motivated the athletic director from Arkansas to write a strongly worded social media post about how upset he is about these late windows. Look, none of us love them, but it's the reality of having to be beholden to your television partners, yeah?
If we're talking about kickoff times, I have just one thing to say to you.
Let's hear it.
Don't threaten me with a good time. I mean, when was the last time Arkansas has ever had to kick off at body clock 9:15 p.m. Central Time? Probably not for a very long time, if not ever. But listen, man, you signed on the dotted line, and you signed on the dotted line a long time ago, probably before all these moving parts started moving yonder. But, dude, I mean, we are collectively the lamest. This is a tremendously lame thing, and maybe that's what we have to embrace, is that we're lame. Because if we're really complaining about kickoff times, and then throwing into the mix that they have to play a morning game the following weekend, come on, dude. Like, has this guy never had his team had to play on Friday night and then have to play on Thursday night the following week? Like, this is the way it goes. Just deal with it, man. Maybe he's afraid of the mighty Utah student section. Maybe he's afraid of the third down jump. We don't know.
Who isn't afraid of the muss and the third down jump? I mean, anyone rolling through the city is afraid of those two dynamics. And don't even get me started on the moment of loudness, Chris. I mean,
Rice-Eccles Stadium at nighttime, as you know, is a pretty intimidating place to play, as I've heard, compared to the daytime. I don't know.
When's the last time you were at a night game at Rice-Eccles Stadium?
BYU game 2 years ago. Pass interference call.
I did see you there.
Yeah. I think we took a picture together.
We did. It was a good look for all of us.
We looked good.
We did. The modern day in college athletics, are athletic directors just more inclined to complain about things, or do we just have more access to everybody's thoughts now?
Well, it depends, because sometimes you'll try to get athletic directors on the phone for anything and they will never respond. And then other times you'll have a memoir, as we had with the case of Hunter Yurachek today. So I think it depends. My guess is he's invoking a little bit of goodwill with the fan base, like, collectively slumping shoulders, like, oh man, Fayetteville at 9:30 on a Saturday night. Like, you're telling me Fayetteville's shutting down at 9:30 on a Saturday night?
Not a chance.
Man.
Not a
Who
chance.
Pig Suey?
Yeah, not a chance. Not. I mean, this just sounds like something to complain about. It reeks of SEC entitlement to me. That's what it reeks of.
Well, I mean, until there is some semblance of not being beholden to ESPN and Fox and wherever they stick you on the almighty board, I think you're just going to have to roll with it. And I mean, how many times have people complained about, some people hate playing at 10 a.m. local. Some people like it. Like Kyle Whittingham loved it. Some people don't like it. It's like, I don't know, man. What do you want? Like, in a perfect world, does every game kick off at 3:30 local time on a Saturday? Sure. But guess what? We don't live in a perfect world. Far from it, actually.
Indeed. The other kick times that were announced, Idaho, 7 o'clock, Thursday, September the 3rd, and then Utah State, 1:30 Mountain Time. The Idaho game's on ESPNU, the Arkansas game's on ESPN, and the Utah State game is on Fox. So give me some hot takes on those start times.
Well, the Vandals might have an edge because we're talking about, similar, where they're mountain time, they're Vandals, Michael St. Louis went there, the GOAT.
Mm-hmm.
Great dome. I think they're the Kibbe Dome, if I'm not mistaken. I might be getting that wrong. So watch out for the Vandals. Probably a great dual threat quarterback from somewhere on the West Coast. And Utah State, roll the dice, man. How are they going to exist without Bryson Barnes, our guy, my guy, if we're being honest? Went to his hometown once upon a time.
Yeah, you did.
We don't know. We'll see. And we're not going to get a Bronco Kyle Whittingham rematch, which, you know what, man, would have been pretty good. I'm not going to lie. It would have been pretty good.
Maybe we'll get it in the CFP if Utah State's able to qualify as the G4 qualifier.
You mean when?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of wit, our guy Jason Patacchio, shout out Jay, Salt Lake Tribune, posts the piece today where we now have some numbers about how omnipresent wit continues to be in our market. So historically speaking, Michigan football has not had a massive footprint as far as recruiting local players in Salt Lake, but obviously Coach Witt is changing that with Jay Hill. 16 Utah high school players have been offered from 2027. No, excuse me, 16 Utah players from this cycle, 11 in 27, and 5 in 28 already. They got the best quarterback in the state, the kid that played for West High School. So we talked about the potential of this happening, and now we have data and numbers to indicate that it's not just a couple players here or there. Witt, Jay Hill, Lewis Powell referenced in this piece. They have their tentacles continuing to kind of permeate through the market to try to get these players to play in Ann Arbor. I know that's not a surprise, but now we have numbers. I mean, they're going to come in and try and take all of it.
And they were always going to.
Yep.
I mean, you're talking about Lewis Powell, who I think Kyle thought of as the best recruiter on staff, and Jay Hill, which really cannot be understated enough that he built a FCS powerhouse in just a few years during his time at Weber State by largely recruiting the state of Utah. And I know it's not apples to oranges recruiting to FCS Weber State and being the defensive coordinator at Michigan, but the dude has an eye for talent, and he's a hell of a recruiter, and he helped transform that BYU defense in the span of 18 months. So shouldn't be surprised. So many schools were kind of invading, so to speak, in the last decade to try to, pick off some of the elite talent that, Utah has been producing. Interested to see, do they take the type of flyers that they would traditionally, during their time at Utah and BYU? Are they going to come for the project 3-star guys, or the Jackson Bennies that you can transform? I don't know, because they probably don't need to. But to your point, this was always going to be a byproduct of Kyle getting that job. And, he's been coaching in this state and existing in this state for 5 decades. So He has his he knows what he wants, and people know that when you play for Kyle, you have to be a certain type of player, and Utah seems to breed lots of those types of players.
Yeah, the high school football ecosystem here is amazing as far as how it has grown. And now, once upon a time, the majority of these kids either went to Utah or BYU, but it's been a decade or so since we've seen players go to Oregon or UW like Puka Nacua or USC. I mean, it's not a new thing for Utah players to go out of state, but it does feel like with the way this sport has grown as far as the pro prospects here, it's just going to be even harder and harder for Utah or BYU to keep up. The one piece in this was a high school coach referencing how still to this day, so many of his players grow up dreaming of playing for Utah or BYU. I wonder how sustainable that kind of dynamic will be for both Utah and BYU to keep up with these out-of-state recruiters.
Well, and the irony of that, Spence, as you know, is like that's all a blueprint of Kyle Whittingham's success at Utah. Yep. Whether you're talking about, guys that grew up watching Utah rise from the bottom in the last 20 years, or BYU players who watched Kalani Sitake transform the program into kind of back to what it once was. Like these are Morgan and Kalani came up under Kyle. So it's fascinating how this is all just a direct correlation to what Kyle has built here and the coaches that he had. Is it sustainable for local kids to want to continue to play at Utah and BYU? I think so. But at the same time, you're talking about a Big Ten blue blood powerhouse who now has direct ties to, the architect of a program here for, 20 plus years. Yeah, that might change the calculus a little bit, not to mention the fact that I'm sure Michigan will be able to cut checks that are maybe a little heftier than Utah or BYU. But then there's also the other side of it, whereas like if you go to Michigan and you're a 4 or 5 star athlete, even from Utah, you're not going to be guaranteed playing time, whereas you're more likely to be guaranteed playing time if you're a 4 or 5 star athlete that goes to BYU or Utah.
So there have been a couple of reports over the past week or so, and, I don't know if you have an update here, but I know that you and the Matt Browns of the world filing your request to get details of Utah's private equity deal with Otro Capital, and there have been more than a few reports indicating that it is not done. These contracts are not executed. They have not been signed and put through. Can you update us on that at all?
I don't have any update on that front, but I would tend to, side with the folks that are doing the work. I've been currently knee deep in rusty metal edging out front. So unfortunately, I don't have any updates. So I'll have to lean on you on that.
Are you in danger of hurting yourself in this project? Okay.
I have a rubber mallet and rusty metal edging with spikes.
Are we wearing gloves?
We're wearing gloves, but does that matter really?
Well, I mean, you just want at least one line of defense between the rusty metal and your skin, I would imagine.
I'll just have to get that shot. What's that shot? Tetanus?
Tetanus shot, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, or just don't hurt yourself.
Can't make any promises. I'm known to be a klutz, unfortunately.
Fair enough. Do I get you for another segment?
You do not.
I do not. Okay, so let's talk lists. You ready? Talk some
I'm ready.
lists. Okay,
I'm
here
ready.
we go. So I believe this was yesterday. ESPN, David Hale, ranked the 138 FBS quarterbacks ahead of the 2026 season. And we'll just focus on the Big 12 guys as our Big 12 expert and savant here. Would you like to take a guess on who the highest ranked Big 12 quarterback was?
Oh, do I get to cheat and ask if Brendan Sorsby's on the list?
You do, and he is not.
I'll say Devin Dampier.
Devin Dampier is one. So Hale put these quarterbacks in tiers. So he technically is in tier 3. Tier 3 includes Gunnar Stockton, Josh Hoover, John Mateer, Rocco Becht, Marcel Reed, and then Devin Dampier. And he does point out that last year Dampier faced just 3 teams that finished better than 7-6. In those 3 games, he threw 2 touchdowns, 3 picks, and averages 5.6 yards per dropback. Mm-hmm. And then finishes with this. As far as just the overall stat line, 3 quarterbacks in college football last year finished with 34 or more touchdowns, 3,300 or more yards, and 6 or fewer turnovers. It was Mendoza, Brendan Sorsby, and Devin Dampier. That's your list.
Well, David makes a great point in that like Utah's schedule was not hard whatsoever last year. And as we've talked about again and again and again, Devin Dampier was good because he had a great year and he came up with an offensive coordinator that knew how to best utilize the skill set. He's also playing in front of 5 really good guys who are probably, out of the 5 of them, I'm guessing 80% of those guys make an NFL roster. We know at least 2 will. And yeah, man, I mean, like Utah's schedule was not good last year, and Devin was hampered at times with, various ankle and leg injuries. But is that going to be different this year? I mean, Utah's schedule doesn't look all that much more difficult. I will tell you, like, if you want to be a glass half full guy, you can look at that Nebraska game and be like, oh man, like that's what it can look like. But then the glass half empty is kind of like, meh, you're going up against a team that really kind of had mailed it in. That's not that good. So can Devin be able to put those types of performances out on a week-to-week basis in 2026, especially against the best teams they play? That's going to determine whether Utah's in the mix in the fall. Like, can he do it against BYU? Can he do it against even like an Arkansas? Can he do it against do they play Houston? I don't even know.
I believe they do. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he just has to be able to prove that he can do it. And I mean, if he was in that same realm, it means he has the ability. But it's kind of like you have to wait and see if he can pull it off.
So we'll just do the top 5 here, and then a thought on who actually comes in at 9. So Devin is 1, Noah Fafita is 2, Connor Wigman from Houston is 3, Bear Bachmeyer 4, and then Drew Mestemaker, who's a North Texas transferred to Oklahoma State, who threw for 1,000,000 yards as a freshman last year, is 5. Will Hammond comes in at 9. Okay, so no Brendan Sorsby. So what do you make of that? Where we go? Devin 1, Noah 2, Connor 3, Bear 4, this new transfer, Drew Mestemaker 5, and then Will Hammond in at 9.
Surprised that Bear's below the Wegman kid. I know he's a Texas A&M transfer who has a lot of talent, but what Bear was able to do was pretty impressive last year, kind of on short notice coming in, transferring in late. My guess is David's analysis is something along the lines of wants to see him be more efficient in the passing game. I didn't think about Fafita. I mean, Fafita has been playing forever, man. And he's, had some ups and downs, but I think you can make an argument that Noah Fafita should be up there with Devin Dampier. It's not exactly a murderer's row of quarterback talent this year, is it, Spence?
No, not. I mean, look, Devin's the highest ranked Big 12 quarterback, but I think there are 15 quarterbacks ahead of him, if not more, as far as the tiers go. So since we brought up the Will Hammond kid at 9, Brendan Sorsby's injunction appeal denied by the NCAA. He does have his day in court coming up in, I believe, in a couple of weeks in Lubbock. This was always going to be the way it was going to play out, wasn't it? I just don't see, and I want to be sensitive. He went to an inpatient rehabilitation facility for 35 days, and the Texas Tech president writing a letter calling the NCAA out for their hypocrisy, taking care of mental health and such. But whether it's the NCAA, Major League Baseball, Pete Rose, whenever there is an example of a coach or a player, or in the NBA, an official with Tim Donaghy, the last thing these guys want are consumers questioning the authenticity of their product. You let Brendan Sorsby back on a college football field this year after what was uncovered, then you're opening up the potential of having to do this over and over and over. I feel bad for him. He's going to take a lot of heat from college football fans that are lunatics, but I just don't see what else you can do here.
So Brendan's injunction hearing is set for Monday, June 1st in Lubbock. So it's coming up. It's coming up soon. I just tend to agree with you. I don't know on what significant merit his side will be able to argue his case, especially after the appeal's been denied. Just a lot of interesting stuff around this case anyways, like the judge who has Texas Tech ties had to recuse himself. I'm with you, Spence. I think this is a Pandora's box situation. And unfortunate for him, but these are the repercussions that come with such things. And like you said, I think it would have been one thing if it was just Romanian football or Turkish volleyball or whatever it was. But the fact that it was Indiana games while he was there, I just think that makes it a totally different beast.
CBS released their preseason top 25 coaches in college football. Kalani at 12, Witt at 10, Morgan not listed. Why do you think they snubbed Morgan?
Well, I think it's probably because of the song choice that he sang at Pebble Beach. I was thinking maybe some Sam Cooke.
He's a natural-born performer, man. You put a mic in that guy's hands, he's going to give you a song.
If you don't get him to sing on the drive this year, you're fired.
Challenge accepted. What are the stakes?
I'll come golfing.
Ooh. All right, done. Perfect. All right, last thing, and I'll set you loose because now we know it is official. Your guy, Mauricio Pochettino, releasing the 26-man U.S. men's national team roster. And no Diego Luna, no Xavier Gozo. It's interesting, the HBO doc that they're doing on the U.S. men's national team featured Diego pretty heavily last night. And then Nike leaned into using Diego for their national team kit release as well. I was surprised. Were you?
It was 50-50. I just don't think Diego's, slow start to the year did him any favors. An odd rollout, the fact that it was leaked. I mean, we are so bad. We're still so bad at this, Spence, as a soccer country. Like, I'm always going to maybe unjustly so hold us to the standard of some of these other nations where it's like they do these releases in such a cool, like, authentic manner. The fact that these guys were getting emails on Thursday and Friday before the holiday weekend and people were expecting this to stay under wraps for like 4 or 5 days. Come on, man. Like, what are we doing? And then like the cringy, like gray, like suit unveiling yesterday made for TV in the middle of the day moment. Just not ideal. The vibes, as you like to say, they're not great. I think Diego was always a 50-50 shot. I think Xavier was always a long shot. Interesting roster selection for a team that definitely can concede a boatload of goals, as we've seen in recent national team games. The fact that Poch is going with like basically 2 true holding midfielders, not ideal. But maybe he's leaning into the strengths of the team, which is the attack, and maybe he knows that he's going to have to beat teams 3-2. I know I try not to sound like Scrooge McDuck on your show too often, but And by the way, Spence, you're mentioning the HBO doc. Did you see that this dude basically said that he could not find time to bring up the Reina Berhalter fiasco from 2022?
I was going to ask you that.
I'm like, dude, come on. Like, why are the kid gloves still on? What is happening? What are we doing? In the words of Taylor Twellman, like, you got unprecedented access for like several years, and you managed to avoid the one thing that like even my wife was like, ooh, this is good. Come on, man. You blew it.
Yeah, you spent 15 minutes on Matt Turner's upbringing. You can give us 10 on the Reina Berhalter stuff. It's Rand Getlin, the director, who, I mean, look, is this just a case where we need to stop using the term documentaries? Because when it comes to a film about a brand that is trying to be protected, this isn't the first time we've seen something like this where we're all waiting for the thing to be brought up and the thing is never approached because they're probably told they can't talk about it.
Did The Last Dance start the end of the documentary?
Yeah, it did. And, of course, that's because of the incredible power Michael Jordan wields. But as entertaining as that was, there were several things that either were never brought up or followed up on.
And we took that personally. I
almost used a term about the Jordan meme about the kids, but that's language we can't use on this show. All right, Chris, don't hurt yourself, man. Thanks for the time today, okay?
Appreciate you as always.
Chris Comrani stops by today, courtesy from our friends at IFA Country Stores. You are the turf whisperer, the grass-cutting guru. Dandelions don't stand a chance on your watch. That's right. When it comes to your lawn, power moves are the only moves you make. That's why you just applied IFA's Weed and Feed for strong, dark green turf without a weed in sight. IFA's Weed and Feed. It's the ultimate lawn owner power move at IFA.coop or at a local Utah store today. All right, we'll catch a quick break. 4 o'clock hour today is Kurt Schmidt and Tim McMahon for some NBA. But coming up next, we'll kind of continue to talk about, we haven't done much on the proposal, the bipartisan proposal that will be brought to the floor for vote that could bring some much-needed legislation and guardrails to college football. We'll get to some of that stuff. NBA playoffs rolling along as well. So busy Wednesday show, and it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. So I'm not a big reality TV guy. It's not really my deal. What about you?
No.
There are two exceptions, though. Laguna Beach and The Hills. Lest we forget the 2019 reboot, The Hills, New Beginnings.
That was a thing?
That was a thing, and this song, Unwritten, by Natasha Bedingfield, was the theme song for The Hills. So that's why it holds importance.
Okay.
Two excellent. There have been, if you include The Real World for us Gen Xers as reality TV, it was like the origin, phenomenal stuff. And then Laguna Beach, and then The Hills, the only acceptable reality TV shows.
Okay. I'm more inclined to say like, what was that one?
That's not helpful.
John and Kate +8, Sister Wives.
Oh, yeah. John and Kate +8. I never saw it, but didn't that dude turn out to be a really bad guy?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
I guess seeing divorces happen in slow motion on television is kind of entertaining.
It seems
some Real Housewives of Salt Lake a little bit.
So as I've talked about, I was massively let down. I don't know much about the Real Housewives ecosystem,
right,
in other cities. I know they're largely popular, but when I saw they were bringing it here, I'm like, well, maybe they'll do a good job of like representing our state and our community, so people won't think we're weirdos. No. And it was the exact opposite.
As is every reality show centered around our great state. You're not wrong.
I feel like right now, like Mormons.
I kind of lean into that, absurdity of it, though.
Yeah, like Mormons or LDS for the people that get offended by that. I feel like they're having like a moment, like nationwide. I feel like every other week there's a new reality series about Mormon housewives or whatever.
Yeah, but like you said, it's kind of like not a great representation a lot of times.
No, it's not. Like
you and I grew up around exceedingly normal LDS folk.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the folks on TV,
yeah,
and the perception that they are putting out to the world, that you see reactions to. You see people who think that Utah is like just full of this weird cult.
Yeah,
and it's like that's, you come here and hang out. We'll show you out. It's pretty normal, pretty cool actually.
It's had the opposite effect. It has made the perception of Utah worse.
Yes.
It's not helping at all. But, I mean, massive numbers, like the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City or the Mormon Housewives Secret Lives, whatever. Big audiences.
Yeah.
A lot of people are watching.
People love some weird drama. And, like I said, slow motion divorce on TV seems to hit the ratings.
Yeah, like I think that's the entire premise of The Bachelor, right? Like you see this young woman fall in love, and then ultimately you watch it all fall apart in real time. And
there's kind of a tie-in there. There's been I want to say kind of like an oversized representation of people from Utah or LDS folks or the like on The Bachelor or being The Bachelor or about to be The Bachelorette and then getting canceled.
Yeah, I mean, I think the perception, it's interesting to consider why people are so fascinated with LDS culture. So, like, from the outside looking in, there's this stand-up comedian in town playing Wise Guys tonight. Did you see the video he posted earlier today?
Who?
I don't know him. He's no one that's famous. But he posted this video because he's playing Wise Guys tonight. Shout out our guy Keith Stubbs. I should probably pull up the guy's name. But he released, it's his first time in Salt Lake, and he was walking around downtown, which of course includes a very prominent view of a LDS temple and Temple Square. And he basically compared it to the Truman Show. He's like, I've never seen a place like this. I've never been to a city like Salt Lake City. And if you were a flyover state, but if you just stop here and spend like an afternoon, it's not going to give you the entire experience of what makes this place uniquely special to live in. And if your only frame of reference is like a layover from a flight or a one-night stay, combined with the way reality television depicts where we live, it's no wonder that so many people across the landscape of America think we're so freaking weird here.
Yeah. And it's an open mic night, so you're right, not famous. You should go do a set.
A tight five?
Yeah.
I could give you a tight five.
I think you should. I think we should get Keith to sponsor a Spence Checketts stand-up set.
I'd have some work to do. I can't just show up.
You did the golf thing. Why not?
Well, I mean, but I've also been practicing. I would have to write a tight five. I'd have to put together some content. I'm not just going to show up. What am I going to do? Show up and be like, hey, guys, Knicks haven't been in the finals since 99. You want to dig into some NBA playoff basketball?
Yeah, you're right. But no, you are correct. You're going to need a lot more time in Utah to see what's cool.
Yeah, I could probably come up with a tight five. It's always been stand-up comedy. I've always been a huge fan of, and also in absolute awe of how these people come up with like an hour special and the guts that it takes to stand up in front of a live audience and put yourself out there to try to be funny. Because I've been to stand-up comedy shows that are just atrocious, and I just want to go give the dude a hug. I'm like, you're not good at this. Please stop doing it. Because people show up to laugh, and if it's not funny and it's just silent when someone's trying to make a joke, like it's as awkward as anything I've ever been in my entire life.
Yeah, even like live music, if it's not great, like it still sometimes has a fine vibe. You're at a bar, it's whatever. But with comedy, tough to think of anything more awkward than like a full-on bomb in a room full of people.
Indeed. Do you have a hot take on start times, college football start times? I'll say that if I'm going to cover a game, I very much want it in the morning or the afternoon. If I'm just going as a fan and I'm just going to meet up with buddies and we're going to tailgate, then go hang, I like the night games at Rice-Eccles Stadium.
Yeah, I don't really care. Never have been a huge focus in on the start times. I mean, it changes things for the players in the prep and what they have to do, but that's just part of the game. I think there are certain things where you got to be careful when it comes to football. Right. This is not a contact sport. It is a violent sport. So you got to make sure guys have their rest. So for me, you obviously don't play a Sunday night game. This is NFL more so, and then get scheduled on a Thursday night. You got to work that around your bye weeks. You got to work that around how you schedule. But outside of that, man, I really don't care much outside of you want good TV numbers, you want good windows, you want your team to be good enough to get those windows. You see the Arkansas AD is upset about his lot in the kickoff times, but even that, I think it's a little off base because you got 6 full days of rest. Right. If you were coming in on 5, if you were playing the Friday night game, and maybe you have a bone to pick there, but this is someone who is now going at the NCAA over these kick windows, and it's on a full week of rest that you're mad that you have a 9 p.m. kickoff. Hey, welcome to our world, right? Try playing in the Pac-12 or the Big 12 for the last decade. That's been half of our kickoffs at 9, 9:15, 9:30. Sometimes at night. Now that the SEC is getting a few of those, there's some folks up in arms, and I think it's a little off base. I think it's just part of the game. If your team was, if there was some attention, some folks wanted to watch your team, you'd be getting primetime windows. You'd be playing Big Noon. So do that instead of being upset about the kickoff time at 9 p.m.
Yeah, this reeks of SEC entitlement. If you missed it, what Porter's referring to is we now have some kick times for Utah football, and among them, the Utah-Arkansas game, which is at 8:15 here local, and that's a 9:15 Central Time kick. And Hunter Yurachek is in his feelings. Some of these athletic directors are they're soft, man. They're flowers. They're babies. So he sent out a strongly worded social media post after the announcement. He said, ESPN has set our game at Utah for 9:15 Central Time on September 12th. We anticipate returning to campus at approximately 6 a.m. on Sunday, September 13th, followed by an 11 a.m. home kickoff game against Georgia just 6 days later on September the 19th. This assigned schedule will cost our student athletes. Yes, let's care about the student athletes. I'm sure you really, really do, Hunter Yurachek. This assigned schedule will cost our student athletes nearly a full day of rest and recovery that they would otherwise have available to them. This is not simply a competitive disadvantage. It's a genuine welfare issue. Wow. For the young men who represent our program and contribute greatly to the bottom line of our television partners. Shout out to the television partners. Smart move. This type of scheduling is unacceptable and demonstrates a clear neglect for the well-being of college athletes. I am confident that there are not many other programs in the SEC, there it is, that would be placed in a similar position, and I will not quietly accept it for our program. I have formally requested that the SEC office and ESPN aggressively pursue an alternate solution for one or both kickoff times during these consecutive weeks. The focus must be on the well-being of the game participants, not the bottom line of our media partner. Hunter Yurachek standing up for the kids. What a guy.
And again, both of those games are on a Saturday.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, travel, hotels, whatever.
Yep.
You have a full week between the games, dude.
Yes, you do. You're going to be all right. My guess is his request from the SEC office and to ESPN will not necessarily be fulfilled.
I kind of hope so, because like I said, this is something that other conferences, mid-majors who delay so that they can have a TV window on FS1 even, like they do it every week. 9:15, 9:30 kickoffs. Come back, play the next week in the morning so that they can be on TV. Arkansas's never had that issue because they're in the SEC, and the hand-wringing about it now, yeah, whatever, dude.
In case you guys missed it, Ted Cruz, Republican, and then Maria Cantwell on the Democratic side have agreed to present a bill, the Protect College Sports Act. Okay, so obviously the NCAA needs an antitrust exemption to enforce several rules that have been challenged in court in recent years. So it's a group of senators introduced a new and wide-sweeping legislation today that aims to address many current issues in college sports, including an effort to restore some rulemaking power to the NCAA and open the possibility for conferences to sell their lucrative television rights as one large group. The NCAA was thrown out of the Supreme Court about 5 years ago, basically being told you are a serial antitrust violator, go figure it out. But the problem with that ruling, while it did open the door and pave the pathway for players to be paid, is no one's in charge now. There's no way to enforce any legislation. There's no way to curtail spending. And while the number as far as money that can be spent by schools on players is agreed upon to be about $20 million, the bigger schools are utilizing businesses to circumvent that number in the name of NIL, and some rosters reportedly are costing as much as $40 million, and that number will grow unless they can figure something out. So the rules include, quote, limiting athletes to transferring schools only one time without penalty. That, to me, is a non-starter for the Supreme Court based off of what they've said in the past. There's no way that's going to pass. A one-time transfer without penalty, in theory, is something that I think a lot of college football fans would enjoy because you get to keep the players that are good and they stay in your community. You get to know them, and it'll be easier to roster construct that way. They want to limit the athlete eligibility to a maximum of 5 years. Prohibiting former pro athletes from playing in college seems like the most simple thing possible. Of course, that should be the deal. Prohibiting schools from poaching a coach from another school during the sports season. That is the Lane Kiffin rule. The bill is also sponsored by Eric Schmidt. And Eric is a Republican and Chris Coons is a Democrat. And it would give the NCAA and the College Sports Commission legal cover to enforce a spending cap for how much each school can pay its athletes. That obviously needs to be done. So it was that aforementioned Supreme Court ruling in 2021 that made it clear that the NCAA is not exempt from antitrust laws, which prevent competitors from colluding to keep costs down. And since that time, as I referenced, the NCAA has really been unable to enforce any rules to regulate the market. And that's ultimately what has caused the most chaos. So we'll see. I would imagine, this is going to be something that will end up in front of the Supreme Court. I think that's probably where we're high speed ahead to. And the Supreme Court has already made their feelings rather well known as it pertains to the antitrust exemptions the NCAA is seeking. All right, let's send you to play some golf. It's the ESPN 700 Festival of Tees, powered by the Utah Golf Association. Each day, ESPN 700 is giving away rounds of golf to the best courses in the state. Listen to the OC show from 11 to 2. Listen to me from 2 to 6 for your chance to win each day from ESPN 700. Details can be found on ESPN700sports.com. We are sending you up north to Mount Ogden today. Just talking stand-up comedy just now. Text in your favorite stand-up comic, either historic or right now. 877-353-0700. 877-353-0700. Text in your favorite stand-up comic. We will send one lucky listener to play a little golf up at Mount Ogden Golf Course. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. We'll switch gears. Coming up, Kurt Schmidt, technical director for Real Salt Lake, stops by. We'll do some NBA and some Utah Jazz with Tim McMahon. Then we'll get to the final hour of the program, and we will say goodnight at 6. It's a Wednesday edition of The Drive, and it's good to have you along for the ride right here on ESPN 700. NBA playoffs will resume tomorrow as the San Antonio Spurs will try to extend the Western Conference Finals to 7 games. The Golden Knights swept the Avalanche. So Stanley Cup rolling along as well. Real Salt Lake on a break now. MLS on a 2-month break now as the World Cup is set to begin in just a number of days. Our next guest is the technical director for RSL, Kurt Schmidt. Happy Wednesday, buddy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, man?
I'm good. So, of course, a lot of disappointment in the market. Gozo was probably a long shot just because his recent run of form put him in the mix because he's been so good. He just hasn't been a part of that ecosystem as far as with the senior team. But, last cycle, Diego plays 17 of the 18 games with the U.S. men's national team, 4 goals, 4 assists. He seemed to be part of, he was part of Nike's announcement for the jersey. And, of course, this ESPN docu-series features Diego, and I think everybody thought he was part of the plan for Mauricio Pochettino. I wonder what your reaction was when you found out he's not making the trip.
Yeah, I think, like everyone, just surprised and obviously gutted for him and the time and the effort and the work that he put into it. And, I think the biggest thing, and you touched on it, but it was how, central a role, or at least how consistent a role that he played for the national team throughout 2025. It really seemed like he was going to be a part of the group. And I think he, even more than that, I think he certainly adds a skill set that the team could use and would need. And, so it'll be interesting to see if that comes from anywhere else as the U.S. goes to the World Cup. But, yeah, it's, gutted for him. I feel for him and Gozo. And, but with certainly with Diego, I think it was a lot of surprise just given the role he had played. No one's ever really a lock, or at least you can't think that way, but it certainly seemed like he was I don't know if mascot's the right word or avatar or whatever you want to say, but an example of the type of mentality and grit that Pochettino wants out of his team.
Can you share with our listeners, what your understanding of as far as his reaction when he heard the news? Maybe you were there, maybe you weren't, but I wonder, because I'd be very, very curious to understand what it was like for him to receive what obviously was a really tough piece of news.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there when he found out, but yeah, obviously, disappointment, but I think he's dealing with it as best you can, which is not easy, and there's obviously still the chance something might happen to someone, and they would call a player in from the broader group, and so if you're trying to deal with your disappointment, but also stay ready for the admittedly small chance that something does happen, and it's just a lot of conflicting emotions and thoughts, and it's difficult.
I wanted to go there next. So I honestly have no idea what the alternate player situation looks like. How many potential replacement players are called into camp? Are they called into camp? Are they just put on a potential list and put to the side? Like, what are the other potential avenues that we could end up seeing maybe manifest into Diego actually playing for the U.S. men's national team?
Yeah, every country's kind of doing it differently. There's some national teams are bringing in more than the 26. There's some bringing in a lot of players and making rounds of cuts as they approach the deadline, because the deadline is actually still in front of us. Just a lot of teams are announcing their squads early. There's a lot of squads announcing instead of 26, maybe 30 players, and 4 of them are alternates. But in terms of just the actual rules, there were 55 players named to the broader squad, and anyone from that group can be picked. So, they don't need to be in camp. Obviously, it helps if they're, training and not walking in off the beach if they're needed. But they don't need to be in camp to get called. They can just be at home, and if the national team needs them, then they'll give them a call.
I think it was Taylor Twellman who was pretty critical of Diego, and in Taylor's opinion, there was some sort of conversation. I'm paraphrasing all of this, by the way, that some people on the national team side were frustrated that Diego did not show up into the season in proper shape, and therefore that's why he suffered an injury. And I think it was Taylor's assertion that at that point he put himself behind the 8 ball. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think, with any player, you want to control the controllables. And I think, Diego came into the season, got fit. He picked up a knee injury, which, was not a lack of fitness. It's actually a different injury. But, and I think he did everything he could once he was healthy. I mean, the World Cup is about, form and being the best team and having players that are playing well on the day. And so, I don't think you want to make a decision based on something that happened months ago, right? You want the guys that are going to do the business for you when you get into June. So whatever you think may have happened 6 months ago, and obviously, he's taking that view as well, right? Because I guess if you look at it in the same way, he's saying like, whatever Diego did for us last year is last year, and I need the players that I think can help me win now. And for whatever reason, he didn't think that was or that included Diego.
So the other piece of this, a lot of people are criticizing Pochettino with how many defensive-minded players he kept on the roster. 7 players that can play center back, and only 4, at least as far as what I'm seeing in front of me, that are true like midfielders where Diego would probably play. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, I actually wish I could give you more insight into this, because I feel like my opinion, or I guess my feelings on it, are very similar to sort of the broader sentiment, which is certainly surprised at how many players who are functionally or can play center back are there. Surprised at how many guys that are functionally wing backs or fullbacks are there. It seems like there's a little bit of extra coverage in that part of the field. Maybe that's because he's worried about some injuries. Obviously there's been a few players that are dinged up, and Chris Richards had something, and so maybe he was concerned about injuries. Maybe it's an eye towards tactical setup in maybe hopefully some later rounds if the team gets there. Maybe the thought is that he'll have to go more defensive, and he wants more of those types of guys in the squad. But I obviously didn't talk to Pochettino about why, or his staff about why he made these choices. They were very tight-lipped about everything leading into this process. And so apart from what he said to the media himself, I don't have that much more insight on it, to be honest. But yeah, it's certainly surprising at the composition of the group.
Did Diego's recent injury come into play at all?
Again, maybe yes, maybe no. There weren't a ton of reasons, given. There weren't any reasons given, to be quite honest. So I think from a performance standpoint, he did everything he could do in the games that he played to get there. I mean, Gozo did too, as well, for that matter. But I think certainly there's a chance that they could feel the injury played into it. But when we looked at it, even though he didn't play for us in Minnesota, we felt he was going to be fine. If we had a game this coming weekend, he would have been in full training all week. So, I don't think they may not have taken him because of this recent injury, but it's not because he wouldn't have been able to play or train even on day one. He would have been cleared for all that.
What should we expect? And, of course, American sports fans want to believe in great possibilities, and American sports fans want to believe that we're as good at any sport as any other country, and that's just not the reality when it comes to soccer, where other countries have a head start on us of maybe a century, if not more than that. But as we approach this cycle for our soccer fans here in the market that might be new to the sport or maybe haven't watched many World Cups in the past, what's a reasonable expectation now that we know what the roster looks like for this World Cup cycle?
Well, I don't have an expectation for you. I have a hope, and obviously I think the hope is to get to the quarterfinals, and with a little luck beyond that, I think that's a tall ask for this team who's never gotten there beyond that. And the quarterfinals have been difficult as well. So it's going to be a tall task, but I think with apart from a handful of countries that are generally relatively dominant, it comes down to a lot of momentum and confidence. And, if teams can play well and get positive results in their first game, that can carry you through. So, it's really about preparing and making sure they come into that game, with the right mindset and hit the ground running. And I think a positive result there, a win there, really sets the table to take it as far as these guys want to take it.
There has been a match played since you and I last spoke, and young Zach Booth gets on the score sheet with his first goal of the year, and Gozo and Sanabria, obviously, because those two continue to provide great service, are on the right side of the assist column. Then you guys gave up a late equalizer to Minnesota on the road, but a point on the road in MLS is never a bad thing. Kurt, what'd you like against Minnesota? What did you not like?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like conceding on a set piece. I didn't like, the time, the lateness of the goal that we conceded, and having, leading so much of the game, and conceding the tying goal so late in stoppage time is obviously a big blow, and it's very disappointing. I think if you had stripped the goals out, just looked at the play of both teams and said, hey, if I told you, this result was a tie, would you believe me? And I think everybody would say, yeah, absolutely. Because I think, if you just look at the balance of play, that's probably a just result. But, certainly they had a lot of danger on set pieces, and I thought we defended a decent amount of them at a good clip, but we weren't able to defend the last one, which is really unfortunate. And obviously the timing and the momentum and the flow of the game is disrupted as well. When you're up like that and you concede late, it obviously feels more like a loss than a draw. So emotionally, it's certainly taken a toll. But as you said, a draw on the road is not anything to sneeze at.
So we've got 14 games now in our back pocket. It's not quite halfway done. The World Cup break is going to throw a little bit of a monkey wrench here, but we're getting a little closer to almost halfway done with the MLS calendar. 26 points, good for third in the West. If I told you at the start of the season you're going to go into the World Cup break third in the West, would you have taken that?
I think I would take that. And I think I think we started the season in good form and at a good clip, and I think we've been playing not just winning soccer but exciting soccer. I think that's always a huge positive. I think going to the World Cup break, especially given the amount of change in the roster and in the 11, I think that's I would have taken that.
So now that we do have this 14-game sample size, I want to revisit a conversation we had a few weeks ago that, as far as what you've identified, we're really good at this. Then on the other side, over the next couple months, we need to make sure we're better at that. What does that sound like right now after 14 games?
Yeah, I think our attack remains a strong suit, and obviously we were missing big pieces of it these last couple of games, and we're still able to find goals. So, I think especially considering last year where it wasn't, I think our attack, has been a strong suit of ours. I think set pieces, both sides of the ball, attacking and defending, but obviously it gets more attention when you concede off set pieces. But our set piece in general, but set piece defending especially, that's something that definitely needs to improve, and I know is going to be a renewed area of focus for Pablo and the staff coming out of the World Cup break. But I think those are two of the sort of bigger areas on each side.
So now that we have this break, what are some of the dynamics as far as I believe it's part of the CBA where the players have to you have to let the players go. They're going to take some time off. So what does this look like now? What are the next couple of months with the club? What are kind of the main points of emphasis?
Yeah, the players are off for about 3 weeks, give or take, and then we come back and essentially start another preseason. So I think it's a really good opportunity to get back to basics and focus on some things and really work on some things that you can't work on when you're playing 3 games a week. And obviously as we bring in 1 or 2 new pieces and hopefully we get them in early enough that they're able to bed in and integrate with the group and be ready to go, even though we start training, about a month before the transfer window actually opens. So those are 2 opportunities that we're looking at out of here. And the other thing that we have to come into it with the mindset that, the first 14 games is gone, and, we can't rest on our laurels. We can't rest on that body of work as good as it was. We need to build on it, and we need to continue to play because we have something to prove.
I don't know what historical precedent there is for a 2020 season in Major League Soccer, but Pablo came on the show last week, and we're discussing just this ongoing storyline about the decision-making process you guys have in front of you with Xavier Gozo when it comes to whether or not you decide to send him on his way to another club for a nice little profit for your club, or you continue to develop him here. Of course, Pablo wants him to stay, obviously. I want him to stay, obviously. And then there's the decision-making process through ownership in the front office, which you'll be a part of. But Pablo kind of shared this anecdote on the show last week that he's told Gozo he thinks he can be a 20-20 guy in MLS, 20 goals and 20 assists. And if he's able to do that, then the opportunities ahead of him will be even greater than they are now. Those are pretty audacious numbers. Again, no historical precedent, but 20 goals, 20 assists for Gozo. What do you think of that potential?
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. I couldn't be happier. So I'm going to take that as Pablo promising that he's going to get Gozo
it's a guarantee.
By the end of the year.
It's a guarantee.
It's a guarantee, right? It's a seal of approval. So, no, I think that'd be great, obviously. And look, I think ultimately, they're young players like Gozo, like I'd love to keep him here forever as well. Like, he's a great kid. He's the type of, not just player, but human that we want on this team and person and teammate. And so, he's someone that I would be ecstatic to keep here his whole career, right, if we could. But I know that that's not in the cards, and that he's a guy that wants to go to Europe, and, every young, talented player of his level wants to go test themselves at the highest level they can. And if he has those opportunities, we're going to help him fulfill that dream and that objective and get him there. But yeah, ultimately, and, just obviously to be super vague about it, Spence, like, it's going to have to be the right opportunity for us, right? And it's going to have to be right for the club that's buying him, because, they're going to want to, have to spend that amount of money, and it's going to be the right opportunity for Gozo. He's going to want to go someplace that can continue his development in a positive trajectory. So as long as, there's three parties that need to come to an agreement, and, I think when that happens, then you'll see Gozo move on to that next level, and we'll be happy to cheer him on from afar when that happens. But it's not something that we're in a hurry to get over the line or anything.
Have you received a call or an offer that has made you seriously consider what they've said on the other end?
No.
All right. Okay.
I mean, I guess, I've taken the calls and any offers that we've received seriously. There hasn't been something where I felt like we might want to take this.
I wonder what the conversations have been like between you, in the front office and the coaching staff, and with Gozo specifically, about wanting to make sure this is done the right way, as you alluded to, because, like, the kid still lives with his mom. You don't want to uproot your life and then move to some foreign country when you've never even lived on your own. And then you add into this kind of entire dynamic that his development under you guys has been so impressive. I just feel like there's got to be a world where you express to him, like, just keep doing what you're doing with us. I know you're eager to show what you can do on the world stage, and they released MLS salaries a couple of weeks ago. He's not being paid what he should be paid for how good he is, so that comes into play. But there's got to be some danger that some big club pays a fee for him, and then they stash him away somewhere that's completely random, and maybe he's not getting enough time or the right coaching or the right guidance. Like, I would imagine all of this is baked into this whole process, yeah?
Yeah, anytime, you make a move like that, there's certainly an element of risk. And, I think you started out saying, you don't want to uproot your whole family and your whole life and all this and move to a foreign country. And I disagree. There's, a lot of kids, and I do believe Gozo is one of them that very much does want to do that. Now, whether they should or not, or when, those are the good questions. But I think, he definitely wants to take that leap. And, again, it's got to be the right opportunity for him. And sometimes you can learn by watching, you can learn by reading, or you can learn by doing. And I think this type of experience, if it is or isn't the right opportunity, you don't really know until you go through it, until you do it. So you do your best to evaluate all the options beforehand. And he and his family and his representation will have to decide, hey, which is the right place to continue his development. But hey, they might get that wrong, and I hope they don't. But obviously we want to find the right place because he's one of ours, and whether it's here or in Europe, we'll always be rooting him on and trying to cheer him getting to the highest level he can.
Yeah, maybe want to was the wrong way to put it. Is it smart to? If
they all want to.
Right. Is it smart to when you haven't even flown the nest in your own home state? I guess is what I meant.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and I think there are some kids you can just you can talk to kids and look them in the eye, and there's some kids that you're like, man, this guy's not ready for this move. This kid is not ready for this, not mature enough for this type of move and what this entails. And there's some kids that are, and I think Gozo certainly tends more towards the side of the coin that is. I mean, he is a happy, positive kid, but I also think he's a smart kid that understands the implications of what this next decision could be and all the ramifications and factors that play into it.
So, same question about Diego, because before Gozo's just meteoric rise, all the conversations about the player who would be moving on soon, it was about Diego, and I don't know how much of the U.S. men's national team decision is baked into this process now, but just kind of same dynamic where we're at with the conversations concerning maybe Diego moving on at some point.
I mean, I think you can pretty much slap 90% of what I just said, or I guess just swap Gozo's name out for Diego with 90% of what I just said. I think, many of the same factors are in play with Diego. For both players, the World Cup was certainly, I don't know if milestone or mile marker is the right word, but certainly an event that was anticipated. And, I think it was a binary, right? They're either going or they're not going. And, that could have had what kind of impact that could have had on their next few months is unknown at this point because they're obviously not going now. And so, we'll evaluate anything that comes our way or comes his way as it regards to Diego. But, we're like Gozo, we're not in a hurry to usher either one of them out the door.
Have you received a phone call about Diego and an offer that has made you seriously consider that?
Well, and at the risk of repeating myself, I seriously consider, all the interest that comes, but no, there hasn't been an offer that's made me feel like we should do it.
What's the relationship like between those two? It's not uncommon in pro sports for a rising star to have the attention on him, and then suddenly he looks over his shoulder and maybe his peer or teammate is getting more of the attention and more of the conversation. Has it affected the relationship between these two young stars at all, Kurt?
Not that I've seen, obviously, and I think they're two teammates that are both good teammates and want to work hard and help the team win. And so that's when we get on the field, that's the focus. So I think we've got a good mix now of young players and veterans and, guys that have, guys like DeAndre Yedlin, who's walked in those shoes, that they're both, the path that they're both on. And, the guy like that can be a real resource for someone like Gozo or Diego. And, obviously someone like Rafa Cabral, who's experienced and, been to Europe and, has a lot of experience to draw upon. So, I think within that locker room, there's a lot of guys that can, or that those two can look up to and ask questions of and get good advice from.
All right, before I set you loose, and I swear if you say score more goals than the other team, I'm going to be mad at you, okay? Before I set you loose, RSL will compete for trophies in the second half of the season if what?
If we tighten up our set piece defense, how's that?
All right. I mean, is that truly the only thing that you think you guys need to be better at?
I wouldn't say it's the only thing. I think we are always trying to improve in all aspects, in all phases. But if you look at, we can score more goals. We haven't scored, all the goals that we could have. But I think that we have, found a good groove in terms of scoring goals and creating chances. I think we've created a lot of really good chances this year, and obviously we scored some good chances. We've scored some difficult chances, but I think right now, I believe where we sit, I believe we've conceded almost half our goals on set pieces. So of varying types, not all of them necessarily long throws or corner kicks, but of different types. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's something that if we were able to tighten that up, I mean, if you chop our goals conceded in half, that's a decent chunk of goals that you take off the board and probably a few more points in our pocket.
You gonna go line a beach somewhere? What's the Kurt Schmidt plan for the World Cup break?
Work hard and sign some players. That's my plan.
Always on the grind. Take some time off, will you?
Well, I'm watching the Academy today, so I don't know if this counts as time off, but I'm out here watching the Academy today.
You don't swing a golf club, do you?
I mean, I can swing it. I just don't know if it's going to hit anything.
Okay. Well, if you want to come swing a club with us, just let us know. You're always welcome.
Will do.
All right,
Kurt. Appreciate it.
Kurt Schmidt, technical director for Real Salt Lake. MLS on a 2-month break now as we prepare for the start of the World Cup, and some good insight there on where we're at in the process of potentially Xavier Gozo or Diego Luna being moved for a fee. I really hope they're not, but, whatever works out. All right, new client on the show. I was there last night because I go in there about every 3 months. It's my friends at Game Day Men's Health, okay? So go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com. That's their website. Here is what they can do for you if you are interested in a little bit of assistance in your endeavor to maybe get back into shape, lose some weight, or if you're in shape, get into better shape as you age. It's better to be preventative as far as things that could cause health issues down the road. We're about to turn our calendars to June, which will give you about 6 months, believe it or not, of data should you have set a New Year's resolution of wanting to get back in shape or lose a little weight. So I would just ask you how you're doing. Hopefully you're doing really well. But if you're struggling with your progress because you're just a little bit older than you used to be, I can tell you that my friends at Game Day Men's Health can expedite your process and help you get into shape. And they can help you do it really quickly because they did it for me. So a couple of years ago, I set the goal that we all set oftentimes. All right, this is the year I'm going to do the thing. This is the year I'm going to clean up some habits, start eating healthy, go to the gym, exercise, and get into shape. So I started my process, and within a couple of months, I was frustrated with what I perceived to be not the progress I was hoping for because I am not as young as I used to be. So I was kind of bemoaning this fact to a friend of mine and asked me if I had ever tried supplementing testosterone before, which I had not. So he recommended Game Day Men's Health, and here's the deal. They're giving you right now the very same deal they give me, which makes all this stuff very affordable, effective and affordable. That's the bottom line, okay? Step number 1 is a free consultation. And so I did mine. A free consultation is just a little bit of blood work, okay? Doesn't take a lot of time. You're going to go in there. They're going to take a little bit of blood. Then they're going to sit down. They're going to go over your levels with you. Let's start here. You should do that no matter what because it costs you nothing and it doesn't take a lot of time. So go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com, schedule that free consultation. Now, when you go in there, tell them you heard me talking about it on the radio. And if you decide to move forward with their program, they're going to give you 50% off of all of their products, 50% off the first year membership. Now, if you need to lose a lot of weight, they have the tirzepatide, they've got the weight loss stuff. My levels indicated I could use a little bit of help with testosterone and then some peptides. So those are the two things that I use through them. And within a couple of months, I was in the best shape of my life as an adult. But here's the best part. Almost 3 years later, I've maintained the shape because, as I said, I go in there every couple months for some blood work, and we adjust what they're giving me based off of my levels. So it's not just a one-time thing. They're going to put you on a program and give you guidance on how you can finally get in the shape you've always wanted to get into as an adult. So GameDayMen'sHealth.com is where you go. GameDayMen'sHealth.com. We've got Cottonwood Heights and Bountiful locations. I went to the Bountiful location last night. Oftentimes we'll go to Cottonwood Heights. Free consultation, 50% off your membership all year long with our friends at Game Day Men's Health. All right, we'll catch a break. Tim McMahon joins us coming up next. We are less than a month away now from the NBA draft. What's the latest on the Utah Jazz, the number 2 pick? Can San Antonio force a Game 7? We'll do some NBA next with our buddy Tim McMahon right here on ESPN 700. NBA playoffs resume tomorrow. The San Antonio Spurs will try to extend the Western Conference Finals to 7 games, and then we will find out who the New York Knicks will be playing for the Larry O'Brien Trophy. We are less than a month from the NBA draft, and Summer League will be in Salt Lake City for the first week of July. Our next guest will be live in Salt Lake City, a celebrity sighting, as Tim McMahon joins us on the program. Hello, Tim. Happy Wednesday. How are you?
Howdy, partner. How you doing?
I'm good. So the Wembanyama stuff from last night, how much of the storyline seems to be fatigue. How much of this is Oklahoma City maybe figuring some things out? How much of this is a young player learning how to win in the playoffs? Your thoughts on not a great performance from Wembanyama last night?
Completely unimpressive night by Victor Wembanyama on the floor in the post game. He did not speak to the media, which, dude, if you want to be the face of the league, even the face of the franchise, after a Game 5 loss, ducking the media is not it. I thought that he wasn't aggressive on the floor. Honestly, I thought it was a wimpy night by him. And could fatigue be a factor? Absolutely, especially with the every other day schedule. With the bodies that the Thunder are throwing at him, as physical as Isaiah Hartenstein is, does it just mean that Wemby's not going to have a monster Game 6? I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't say that. He's been the best player on the floor by far in 2 games this series. Those are the 2 the Spurs won. They need that guy for Game 6. And they need him to make up for, honestly, a pretty embarrassing Game 5 for him.
So how much you kind of referenced it. Game 1, I think Hartenstein guarded him on 4 primary possessions. And since then, Daigneault has essentially made him not the only defender on Wembanyama, but as the primary defender on him. How much credit does he get?
Well, he gets a lot. And, there's been games where Hartenstein definitely was in Game 2 and in Game 5. Those are probably the 2 best games that they've had defensively on him. So, yeah, look, he gets a lot of credit. Now, he'll be the first to tell you, look, he ain't out there playing him one-on-one. I mean, obviously the whole scheme is designed first and foremost to, show him bodies, to, make it tough for him to get where he wants to go, to make everything hard on him. But, Hartenstein has been the primary guy who is making it tough on Wemby to get to his spots before he gets the ball. And, with a guy like that, you've got to do your work before he gets the ball, because even Hartenstein at 6'11", 7 feet, if Wemby is able to get duck-ins and catch it, a couple feet from the rim, forget it, you're doomed. And so, they've done a great job, or they did a great job last night of taking away all the easy stuff. And, you make him try to make plays off the dribble. And look, he's 7.5 feet tall. Can he do some stuff off the dribble? Yes. Is that where he's best? No. And especially not with all the all the ball hawks they have, with the Carusos and the Wallaces and, and even Shea, those kind of guys coming in and digging. And then the 3-point stuff with him, he can get hot out there. He can beat you from out there, but you'd much rather have him trying to beat you from 27 feet than from 2 feet.
Well, and to underscore your point about just the lack of force and the lack of urgency, I mean, look, he's going to walk into a gym and block 3 shots no matter what, but 6 rebounds? 6 boards,
yeah, no.
You know what I mean?
And, 6 boards, and honestly, it's as unimpactful a defensive performance as I've ever seen him have, both in terms of, the rebounding. But they, according to the ESPN tracking, when Wemby was the primary defender, when he was contesting shots, the Thunder shot, I forget the exact numbers, but it was 69%. They scored 127 points last night, and they shot 49% during the minutes that he was on the floor. He's the most dominant defensive force I've ever seen, but we didn't see that last night. And if if that's not the guy you see in Game 6, then we'll see him next year.
Yeah. So when it comes to Mitch Johnson after the game said, look, he needs to shoot more than 15 shots. And as you referenced, they did try a bunch of different things, including making him the primary ball handler 27 feet away from the basket on pick and roll. So when it comes to what you've seen from in this series, when San Antonio has been most effective, and Wembanyama specifically, what needs to be different from last night to Game 6 back in San Antonio?
I mean, they've got to figure out ways to get him touches close to the basket. Whether that's like sometimes it's going to be transition where he's just out, able to get around. I mean, he did miss a lob dunk in transition though, where he didn't catch clean. That was pretty surprising. Even if it's not like a lob dunk or like a fast break where he's able to get early deep position, some of that type of stuff. I think they probably have to have him off ball a little bit more and try to, have him moving into the catch instead of catching it stationary. But giving him the ball and asking him to play ISO, I don't think that's going to be very effective. Not against this defense.
You referenced, and it feels like this is pretty unlike him. One of the things that's been great about Wembanyama is that he wants to play hard in the All-Star game. He wants to win every trophy. But bouncing last night without speaking to the media, which apparently he was warned for, is it just a frustration thing? Is there anything else there?
I mean, he wants to be the face of the league. He's been very clear about that. He's certain, the guy was giving the Magic Johnson Award for his cooperation with the media this year. And honestly, man, it looks like wimpy loser behavior to do what he did last night. It's weak. It just is. It doesn't mean it's like some damning thing that's, going to be a stain on him forever. But like, dude, it's weak. And it was weak that he didn't talk to the media after he delivered a cheap shot elbow to Naz Reid's chin. It was weak that he didn't talk even, at practice or a shoot around before the next game and then refused to ever address it. There's been some, he's 22 years old. He presents himself as very mature for that age, but there has been some immature front-runner behavior from him during these playoffs.
So an interesting video surfaced of Wembanyama whispering something to Mason Plumlee and Bismack Biyombo before they checked into the game, and then both players gave Jared McCain a bit of a shot. Can you provide insight onto what happened there?
I'd be honest with you, I didn't see that until after media was done, so I wasn't able to ask anybody about it. Obviously, nobody's been able to ask Wemby about it. You saw the same video I did. I don't want to jump to conclusions and speculation, but those were clearly cheap shots. I mean, the league came in, and especially the one from Plumlee, which that surprised me because he's a solid bet. Like, he's a guy who's been in the league for a long time and certainly doesn't have that kind of reputation. But, he basically planted an elbow in the guy's back when he wasn't looking, and the league upgraded that to a flagrant one. You can tell me the Biyombo play is just a hard foul. I mean, a hard foul in garbage time, though, it's questionable at best.
So, of course, San Antonio is going to rely on Wembanyama for so much because he's that good, but they need more from their primary offense initiators. I think Castle has been solid, but the turnover issues from the young wings continue to plague them. And you look, I don't know that De'Aaron Fox is entirely healthy, give him credit for playing 33 minutes. If we move away from Wembanyama, how do you analyze the performances from the Spurs offense initiators, the young wings, and then, of course, De'Aaron Fox?
Well, it's certainly not enough from Fox last night, not enough from Dylan Harper, who's also not completely healthy. Harper's got a little issue with his adductor that caused him to come out of game 2. Fox he's playing on a high ankle sprain. I mean, he's not close to healthy, but he's on the floor, and it's the Western Conference Finals, so the circumstances are what they are. This is what they need, if fair or unfair. Vassell was a non-factor last night. All those guys are capable. They need at least a couple of them to come through with performances to complement what they hope to bounce back night by Wemby tomorrow.
On the other side of things, of course, when it comes to a home game, typically young players and role players are going to be better at home. And Caruso didn't score in Game 4 and went nuts again in Game 5 with 22 points. They ultimately start Jared McCain, who had a great second half. We'll see what happens with their injured wings. But as far as the Oklahoma City side of things, did they figure anything out that was different between Game 4 and Game 5, and what do you expect from them back in San Antonio?
I don't think they discovered anything revolutionary, but they came out of Game 4 thinking that the results were that bad because their process was terrible. They felt like they let San Antonio be the aggressors. They felt like they didn't play with any force. They felt like their pace was awful. Their pace, not just being how fast they're bringing the ball up the floor, but how fast they're getting their actions, how fast they're moving off the ball. They're cutting. They thought their screening. They thought they had a bad screening game. They thought they were just terrible all around offensively. They did all those things better. Now look, they also added some juice to the starting lineup. And it's funny, Jeremy King and Shea didn't get up to a good start, but they both really got a rolling in the third quarter. But without AJ Mitchell, who's out again, without Jalen Williams, who's questionable but hadn't been close to playing these last two games, they need some offensive punch, and Jeremy King's been able to provide that in two of the last three games.
Since you and I last spoke, the New York Knicks swept Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, the Cleveland Cavaliers, out of the postseason. I was pretty disgusted with the defensive effort, namely of Harden. I mean, try to run back. He would shoot a three and not even run back, and there's a run out, no box outs. Jalen Brunson at some point was like, it can't be this easy. I don't want to take anything away from New York because they're on a historic run, but what did you make of the way Cleveland just bowed out of that series, and what do you think is next for the Cavs?
Well, I think Game 5, because analytically it's tied 2-2. So, the Cavs are just fine if you listen to Kenny Atkins's calculator. No, the Cleveland embarrassed themselves in that series. Honestly, I was surprised that there wasn't some real consideration given the moving on from Kenny Atkinson. There was a lot of noise about that midseason. I guess they felt like getting to the conference finals justified bringing them back. But, man, it was a humiliating conference finals appearance for them. You can tell me you won game one analytically. I watched you blow a 22-point lead in the last 8 minutes and have that linger over you the rest of the series. And, making or missing shots is one thing. But like you said, the transition defense, and like Atkinson said before Game 4, that was their top priority. And they had the worst transition defensive game in the playoffs I can remember in quite some time. So, I think there's going to be some pretty significant shakeup in Cleveland this summer. It's just not going to be with the head coach. Has the Knicks run? I mean, again, it's hard because on one side they're not providing a lot of pushback, but on the other, if you look at the other side of it, you really have to acknowledge that New York is on this historic offensive output, winning 10 straight playoff games. Do you believe that they can make either OKC or San Antonio uncomfortable in the finals? I mean, you've got to at least respect them having a chance with the way that they're playing. And I understand the Eastern Conference is not as strong as the West. Having said that, over the last 11 games, they have the best 11-game point differential in NBA history. Not NBA playoff history, in NBA history. I assure you there have been plenty of 11-game schedule stretches where teams have played worse competition than the Knicks have running through the Eastern Conference playoffs. So, what they're doing is absolutely historic. And, I've said this before, they kind of remind me a little bit of the 2011 Mavericks, a team that for a lot of the regular season, you're like, this team doesn't have it. There was a stretch midway through the season or even late in the season. You're like, dude, this team is a playoff failure waiting to happen. And then things just click at the exact right time. For the Mavericks, when they swept the defending champion Lakers in the second round, that's been like, oh, look out. And I think you got to have an look out attitude right now watching the Knicks because they're not just beating teams; they're absolutely dominating them. Before I set you loose, of course, the pro basketball team that plays here in this market is set to make what hopefully is a historically special decision on June the 23rd. We've had multiple guests on since you and I last spoke, and there's kind of a thought in the market that people out here believe they're doing everything they can to walk away from draft night with A.J. DeBonce in their back pocket. Of course, Washington will have the first call on that. What's the latest intel you have as we're about 3.5 weeks away from the NBA draft with the Utah Jazz sitting at 2? I don't think there's a desperation to get A.J. DeBonce. I think they would love to have him. I think they would be just fine taking Darren Peterson. A lot of people that I talk to think that there's a two-player tier at the top of the draft. I have not seen the Jazz's draft board, but the sense that I get is, they think that either one of those guys has face for the franchise star type of potential. Good stuff, Tim. Travel safe. Enjoy the rest of the playoffs, and we'll chat soon. I appreciate you, brother. All right, Tim McMahon from ESPN covers the NBA. He's been all over the place during the Western Conference Finals. I always appreciate his time. You can find him at Ban McMahon on social media. Want to let you know that Alter Bridge is taking over the complex on November the 29th.
Text ALTER to 33986 for your chance to score a pair of tickets. And shout out to our good friends at IFA Country Stores. You are the turf whisperer. You're the grass cutting guru. Dandelions don't stand a chance on your watch. When it comes to your lawn, power moves are the only moves you make. That's why you just apply IFA's Weed and Feed for strong dark green turf without a weed in sight. IFA's Weed and Feed, it's the ultimate lawn owner power move at ifa.coop or at a local Utah store today. All right, we'll catch a quick break. We got 3 hours in the books. We have 1 hour to go. We'll touch on some of these college football storylines that have permeated throughout the ecosystem of the sports media landscape over the past 24 hours. We will bid you good night at 6 o'clock. Eastern Conference Finals in the Stanley Cup playoffs will come your way when we say goodnight. It's the Drive on a Wednesday, and it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. All right, no NBA playoff basketball tonight. The NBA playoffs resume tomorrow in San Antonio, where the Spurs will try to extend the Western Conference Finals to 7 games. You do have some NHL playoff action tonight. You can hear it on this radio station when we say goodnight. Tom Dundon's Carolina Hurricanes will look to take a 3-1 lead over the Montreal Canadiens. The Vegas Golden Knights sweep the Colorado Avalanche last night by winning 2-1. Man, the Avs were the favorite to win the whole thing. And Vegas, of course, took care of the Mammoth and went on to run through the West. So the battle for Lord Stanley's Cup continues, but no NBA playoff action tonight. Looks like AJ Mitchell's out tomorrow for Oklahoma City. Jalen Williams is questionable. Certainly De'Aaron Fox and Dylan Harper are going to play, but neither look very healthy. Joe Mazzulla won Coach of the Year, fourth coach from Boston to win Coach of the Year. So it is award season in the landscape of pro basketball. I want to give a shout out to our friend Sarah Todd, Deseret News, who covers the NBA and the Utah Jazz. She wrote a really good piece on where we're at with Darren Peterson. Now, if you missed it, Tim McMahon just mentioned that he does not believe the Jazz are necessarily putting all their chips in the middle of the table to go with A.J. DeBonsa. And unless they're very high on Cameron Boozer at 2, it does feel like Darren Peterson should be the selection. And by the way, that's where I've landed. I would, if you have landed on A.J. as the guy you want, I am not opposed to some sort of compensation package being sent to Washington for one. I would not do ace and 2 for one and one of their young wings. That feels like too much. But maybe number 2 and a future first to move up to 1 to grab AJ. But if you stay at 2, I just think you draft whoever Washington doesn't. And I would take Darren Peterson, even though this stuff with Kansas this year was a little bit weird. He missed 11 games, played fewer than 25 minutes in 7 games, asked to be subbed out on a number of occasions. But as Sarah outlined, she interviewed some medical professionals because in the ESPN interview, Darren Peterson said that it was creatine supplements that were the cause of his cramping, including a full-body cramping episode that ended up with him in an ambulance and then at the hospital. Peterson said, quote, "I had never taken creatine before going to college, but after the season, I took 2 weeks off, and they did tests which showed my baseline level was already high. So they said when I dosed creatine, it must have made my levels unsafe." Well, Dr. Brian Schultz, who's the team doctor for the Lakers, as well as Dr. David Cutler, a board-certified family medicine specialist at Providence St. John's Health Center, both said there isn't a blood test that measures creatine. Cutler said, quote, "There isn't a blood test I know of that measures creatine, so that doesn't make sense to me. And most of the studies that I'm familiar with don't really show statistically more or less cramping with creatine than not taking creatine at recommended levels. Does that either exclude creatine as a possible cause or support it as a potential improving factor in relieving cramps? I just don't think so." And the team doctor for the Lakers, Dr. Brian Schultz, said, "Yeah, I've never heard of that." So more questions than answers, quite frankly, regarding Darren Peterson. But that's kind of where I've landed. As far as what I think the Utah Jazz should do. Whoever Washington doesn't take out of the 2 young wings, I think the Jazz land on him at number 2. So have you changed your thought process on this? There were some reporting like last week that Cameron Boozer's camp believes he's in the mix at number 2. Where I'm at with the Jazz, with what you kind of need in the league these days and what the Jazz already have on the roster, unless you're willing to move a future first to number 2 for 1, I just say take whoever Washington doesn't.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you there. I believe that if you try to go all in and get the number 1 pick and get AJ DeBonsa, Washington's going to kind of call your bluff and up that asking price. They're going to make you pay for it. And that's probably going to require you sending an Ace Bailey, sending a young piece that really, really is already a part of your future plans. Now, if the Jazz can come down on that, if maybe there is a little under the table handshake with Washington that maybe AJ isn't like all in their number 1 guy, you can talk him down a little bit and there might be some wiggle room. But if I'm the Jazz, I'm definitely not going to send a bunch of picks, send a young piece, and then still, maybe be out on a draft pick, because at the end of the day, that's all this is, right? These are prospects that we think can amount to a lot, but until they play in the NBA, we just don't know for sure, and it's just not something I'm comfortable really putting a lot of assets out there for. I wonder, the stuff with Darren Peterson is interesting to me. I am not a medical professional, so obviously going to punt to those guys. But we've been around sports a lot. That's not something I've ever heard of, and athletes have been for decades taking a lot of creatine. It's not a new thing, so that's an interesting one to me that you have to dive into. Maybe I will read more into it as we get closer to the draft. But I think that's going to be a question mark, is the Darren Peterson stuff, and that is why the Cam Boozer potentially at number 2 stuff is more intriguing. Not necessarily because Carlos Boozer is in town, but because I do think there is a real question mark on what Darren Peterson's issues are, medical wise, and that's really one of the only things that, when it comes to draft picks, raises red flags. You look at prospects as these investments that you can make better. You can, yes, draft them as a talented player already and then turn them into something even more. But if their medicals get in the way, that's something that can really scare front offices away. And it has. And it's also something that hasn't scared Jazz front offices away in the past, and then it's come back to bite them. Adante Exum, etc. So I do wonder how that plays out, and if we find anything more before draft day, because the number 1 pick looks like it's going to be AJ. From 2 to 4, I think it could go any which way, and I wouldn't be all that surprised. I really wouldn't.
By the way, the NBA has upgraded Mason Plumlee's foul on Jared McCain to a flagrant 1. If you missed this last night, there's a really damning video going around. So San Antonio, Mitch Johnson pulled his starters with like 3 minutes left as the game was basically over. And as Wembanyama is walking off the court, he whispers something to both Bismack Biyombo and Mason Plumlee, and then goes and sits down. And then Plumlee and Biyombo give Jared McCain big-time shots. I mean, look, no one knows what was said, but if you if you add 2 and 2 together, it did look like Wembanyama ordered the code red, and Biyombo and Plumlee were happy to oblige.
Well, especially the Plumlee one. The Biyombo one, he got the ball, like it was a clean block, and then he followed through pretty harshly. But the Plumlee one, he like kind of zeroed in on McCain and then just went at him, threw an elbow, almost was like he was lead blocking as a left tackle. And yeah, it should have been upgraded to flagrant 1. I struggle with this one because at the same time, the way that Oklahoma City plays. Now, I'm not advocating to go throw a cheap shot. Definitely don't go like take a guy out in midair or do something that's going to get someone hurt. But when Oklahoma City plays the way they do, there's also going to be a boomerang effect where teams are going to start making you feel the fouls. If they're just going to call them anyway, or you're going to hit the floor every time you get touched anyway, you might have some players on the other team that are going to make that worth their while in a way, right? Again, not advocating for it, not saying you should go cheap shot guys at the end of the game, but there is an effect that OKC has that really grates on players and frankly grates on people watching the game as well. And I think you're starting to see a little bit of that.
Yeah, there are too many stretches of that game last night because when, I don't know if you want to say the refs allow them to play or when the two teams are actually playing and not trying to draw fouls, it's high-level basketball. And then for 3 or 4 minute stretches, you feel like you're watching a free throw contest. It just kills the entire flow.
Because you are.
Yeah.
Right? And there's it's not just like guys that are good at getting to the free throw line and initiating contact. It really is a lot of salesmanship, right? Tom Haberstroh did a deep dive on a lot of this, of how much Shea Gilgeous-Alexander hits the floor and how much he gets called gets the foul call on those instances. And it's like more than any of the stars left in the playoffs combined, right? Sorry, but it's something that you're going to hear about if it's how you decide to approach the game, regardless of how great you are, because I'm not taking away from just how good he is. I mean, you go back to Kobe Bryant, who SGA gets some comparisons to. They had to kind of change the rules because Kobe was so good at that rip through, right? Getting you to reach and then basically making you foul him and selling it. This is something I think the league is going to at least put some attention towards, and OKC, for their part, they're going to continue to do it because it's got them here.
Today was the deadline for Eldrick Tiger Woods to submit an entry into the Open Championship at Royal Birkdale, and he elected not to do that. So Tiger already missed the Masters, missed the PGA Championship, and does not have an automatic exemption into next month's U.S. Open at Shinnecock. So this means Tiger will, for the second straight year, not play in a major championship. 15-time major champion, 82 PGA Tour wins. That is a record-tying number. And so we will not see Tiger once again all year long. Of course, he has been sidelined from competition due to injuries. Mostly this year, of course, it's the arrest on the suspicion of DUI in March. He reportedly went over for some treatment overseas to Europe and then had a chance to submit an entry for the Open Championship, which I'm sure would have been approved. But he will not play at Royal Birkdale for the Open Championship and is now eligible at the age of 50 for the Champions Tour. Is that where we're next going to see Tiger battling all the old dudes for golf championships?
It's possible. I'm holding out some hope that we at least see him in a PGA Tour event going forward, but I think we'll probably see him play on the Champions Tour. I think it's something that he would be willing to do, if not just golfing on a simulator.
Your boy's a year and a half away from qualifying for senior events.
Oh, yeah. See, now we're talking.
I know, man. It's
we're talking.
It's pretty depressing, but when we had Pugmire on, I said, look, I'd like to try to play in another qualifier, but how close am I to being able to play with the old dudes? He's like 50 years old. So I'm knocking on the door. You might see me walking around with some of the old dudes now.
Hey, it's that's your those are your compatriots. Those are your folks now. So there's nothing wrong with it.
Well, one of the main issues I ran into at my qualifier, outside of just playing horrible golf, was the 26 and the 32-year-old just bombing their drives 40 yards by mine. And if I lay into it, I can get you 280, which is fine. But if the other guys are hitting at 320, 330, it puts me behind the eight ball.
Yeah, my buddy Preston was actually in that event. And
how'd he do?
I think he was kind of middle of the pack.
All right.
I think he shot an 80-something. But
all right, very nice. Very nice. So, yeah, I high-speed had to playing an old man sports with the old men instead of trying to hang with the youngsters. All right, little Stanley Cup playoff action coming up on the other side. It's Carolina and Montreal. Porter, what comes our way on a Thursday edition of the show?
Thursday edition of the program. Dave McMiniman stops by for your NBA Daily Assist. Craig Bolerjack is going to swing in studio. We'll talk NBA playoffs. We'll talk Jazz and the NBA draft with Bowler. We'll probably effort the aforementioned Sarah Todd and, of course, Sports Court on a Thursday, and we'll go from there.
There you go. So join us for a Thursday edition. NBA playoffs will be back, so we'll get you ready for Game 6 between the Spurs and OKC, and we're 3.5 weeks away from a historic night for the Utah Jazz, drafting number 2. Special thank you today to Bill Oram, Chris Camerani, Kurt Schmidt, and Tim McMahon. For any of the sound you missed from the show, website is ESPN700sports.com. Check out the mobile app and take us on the go. And then for what we do in this space every afternoon for 4 hours, you can check out our podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. Also, episode 8 of Reality Check with Spence Checketts, featuring a sit-down with my dad, with Dave Checketts. If you want to check that out, it's always fun to catch up with him. We will talk to you on a Thursday edition of The Drive. Have a great Wednesday evening, and keep it right here for some NHL playoff hockey on ESPN 700.